The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And I'm so thrilled to be here on this Tuesday. I hope everybody had a wonderful weekend. For those of us here in the United States, we had an extended weekend. Well, some people had an extended weekend. We had an extended work week and just got back yesterday. Emily Goodwin, our technical director, and I were in Seattle at the ABAI conference, ABA International Conference, where we were able to interview so many people. And I'm so excited that in a week's time, we're going to be able to start showing you some of those interviews. We've brought back the footage and we're going to get it all edited up into edible chunks. But it was amazing. And it's something that we're going to be talking about throughout the day today. We're only here this week live today. For those of you who are watching the rest of this week, we're not going to be here because we have just come off of several days, long days of working, and so we're not going to be here the rest of the week and want to share that with you. But we wanted to come in today, share some really important things with you, and talk a little bit about what this conference was like, along with some other things that we normally talk about on Tuesdays. We have a special guest today that I'm really excited about. But really, my head is overstuffed with things to talk about, and that's an exciting place to be in. I want to let you know that we are going to be with you for the next 3 hours talking about topics having to do with autism, in particular ABA. There's a really good reason why we talk about ABA as much as we do, because we know it's the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. That's, sort of the long and the short of it. Now, there's another reason why we talk about ABA endlessly, besides the fact that it's effective for all of our kids on the spectrum. We're going to see progress with all of them if we're doing quality ABA with them. But it's such a huge topic. There's so many different things, and my batteries are so rejuvenated from having been at this conference and talking to so many different experts about how this is really, the takeaway I got was this is an art. This is a craft, this is an art, and it requires imagination and looking at the individual child and taking these tools and crafting them in a way to be efficient and effective with an individual child. And that's exciting to me, because I think as a parent, so much of the time, the things that are frustrating, whether it's with the general public or with the education system or with the funding that we get for our kids, it's that too often people like to put our kids into a little mold and say, well, this is autism, which, as you guys know if you watch the show, I have a technical term for things like that, a steaming pile of poo. It's my technical term. Our kids are all individuals. There's this huge spectrum in which encompasses our children and our adults that are on the autism spectrum, and it is really a disservice to them and to us if we try to pigeonhole them into one small little word and say that there's one thing to do for all of them. Well, ABA is this great broad thing, and it's a series of tools that you can use and apply in myriads of different ways. So that's why we talk about it endlessly, hoping to help you to be able to help whoever it is in your life that you want to reach their fullest potential. And by the way, did you notice that I said whoever in your life you want to help, that you want to reach their fullest potential? And I didn't say on the autism spectrum. We went to this mammoth conference, and there were people delivering papers and talking about research in all these different places and giving all this information. And a lot of it was about autism. It was. But a lot of it wasn't, because ABA isn't just for people on the autism spectrum. It just happens to be really fabulous, to people on the autism spectrum in addition to everyone else. So we can take these tools and we can use them for ourselves. We can use them for the rest of our family. We can use them, I found out, on our politicians. We had a wonderful interview with somebody about that. I was very excited about that, so I can't wait to show you guys all these wonderful things. I want to remind all of you that as much as we talk about ABA, I am not an expert in ABA. I'm not an expert in autism, not an expert in behavior, psychology, nutrition. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a mom and a former teacher. I will say that. And my son is turning 9 a week from today. It's like, oh, I get dizzy even at the thought of that. But yes, he's turning 9. My wonderful, wonderful young man. I can't call him a little boy anymore. And he's doing so well. Overtired and overstimulated, and now I'm going to cry the whole day. He's doing so well. And I have to thank for that the people who helped us and gave us information and ABA. And I'm going to be forever grateful for everybody who was a part of his team. He did get services here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and it changed his life. So if I seem like a big card fan, I am. But I want you to know, we talk about this all the time in the show, that ABA is this wide, wide world, and that there are so many people out there, and you may be, involved with other people, and that's a wonderful thing. So I want to remind you that there's so much that can be done for our children, and that's what I'm here for, to be your conduit to information. If you have questions, if you have concerns, if there's a topic that you want covered, there's something that you wish you could ask somebody, let me know, because I'll get them in here or on Skype, and we'll ask them and start to piece together the answers that we need for our individual children, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it's my privilege and honor to be here on your behalf and to be asking those questions. Can I tell you, this is a very rewarding thing for me. I'm learning so much. You guys are teaching me so much. Sometimes I don't know which question to ask, and you guys help me out. So I know over the weekend, at least there's one question in particular that somebody wrote in on Facebook, because I said, I'm here, what do you want to know? And I have some answers. So we'll be talking about that in a little while. In any case, I want to let you know how you can interact. If you're new to the show, really want to make sure that you know this is meant to be a conversation. However we can help you. I want to be your new BFF. So what would you ask? And don't be afraid, because I'd love to hunt it down for you. And if you're watching us right now on Autism-Live, it will either say live or rebroadcast across the top of your screen. If it says live, then that box that says your questions is active. You can type anything in there, hit enter, and it will show up magically here on my screen. Love that. And then you and I can be having a conversation, or whoever we have as a guest, you can be having a conversation with them. There are other ways, though, of participating with us if it says rebroadcast, or if you're watching us on any of the other different medium that were available. So let's cycle through what some of those things are. First of all, you can email us. That's a wonderful way to participate. Want to let you know that we will answer your question on the next available live show, but we also send you back a typewritten response. Sometimes it's from the actual expert, so that's a wonderful thing. Feel free to email us anytime, any day, wherever you are, and it's free. So that's a wonderful thing. You can also call us. We have a phone line that you can call in, leave a message. If we're here and live on the show, you can be patched into the show. But if we're not here, we can always get back to you as soon as possible when we're back in the studio. There's also Skype. We're starting to Skype in more and more people, whether it's a parent blogger, a parent with a question, an expert from around the world. We met some really interesting people this week that are trying to affect change globally. Sustainable change in countries that have really not had the opportunity to have the benefit of, I know sometimes here in the United States we think, we have to, we're constantly striving to make things better and make it a level playing field so that all of the kids get access, right, to the things that we know work, specifically ABA. And, you know, we're always disheartened by the fact that there are kids here who don't, but then around the world, so we're going to be Skyping with them around the world in some of the different places that they go to send that message of hope. Also want to let you know you can participate with us via Facebook. This is a great way for all of you to converse with us and with each other, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we asked the question of the day, and a lot of you are answering the question of the day on Facebook. We really appreciate that. You can also tweet. We are accepting tweets and tweeting when I can. I don't know how all of you manage to have the time to do all of the things you do, and maybe you can help me out and let me know how you do these things. I'm working on it. But in any case, there you can tweet with us. I mentioned that there are other ways that you can be watching us too. Excuse me. You can be watching us on Blip. Blip TV is a wonderful way that it serves kind of like your DVR for this show, that you can rewind, fast forward, look up past episodes. They're all there. So a wonderful, wonderful thing. We're also available on YouTube. I love to watch some of the shorter clips back on YouTube, some of the experts that we have, but some of the longer ones are there as well. And of course, we are now on iTunes. So you can download, you can subscribe. It's all free, by the way. There's no cost, which I'm really, really happy and proud of, that we're able to get this information to you in these different ways. The audio-only podcast is coming. I know I keep saying that, but it is. And one day I'll be able to say, yes, no, it's done. So please participate. Oh, and Ustream. Forgot about Ustream. Ustream is one of the newest ways that you can watch us, and we really appreciate Ustream for making that possible. Find the way that works best for you. And by the way, if there's another way that you would like to be watching us that you think would be more convenient for your schedule, please let us know. We can't read your mind, but we appreciate when you guys take the time to let us know what we can do to help you. That's what we're here for. Truly, I mean that. Okay, we like to start every morning with something that I fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. Boy, it was so fun to be at this conference and hear all these people, but let me tell you, there was some jargon going on. And what was interesting was that they were even making fun of themselves at the jargon. There was one gentleman who stood up and said, yes, you know, when we started in this field and we learned the jargon and we would share it with our friends and family. And after a while, we would share it with our family because we had no friends anymore because they didn't want to listen to the jargon. I thought that was really funny. We know as parents and teachers, we want to be more efficient. We want to be more effective working with our kids on the spectrum. And you know, it's a hard thing in the beginning, but we have to make friends with the jargon. I know, I resisted, and I am still sometimes resistant, but we need to make friends with the jargon, at least in some part, so that we have enough of the working definitions, that we understand enough so that it doesn't hold us back, right? We don't want them to be held back. Well, we don't want to be held back either. So we take one word, one phrase, one anagram at a time, and we try to demystify them, give you an actual definition, because I personally find it really reinforcing sometimes to make fun of the actual definitions and how full of jargon they are. But eventually we do start to, you'll see, you start to like the actual definition better than the working definition. But we do give you a working definition, which is less specific, but it is meant to help you to access the beginning understanding of these terms and be able to apply them to your individual children and students. Okay, so today's word phrase is establishing operation. And you'll see a lot of times that in print they'll refer to this as the EO, and we talk about this from time to time. The EO. Okay, so what is an establishing operation? A motivating operant. Oh, don't you love these definitions? That increases effectiveness of stimulus as a reinforcer. Now, because my son had he had 5 years of ABA therapy, some of this makes sense to me, and I go, oh yes, no, I know. I think I have a pretty good grip on what an EO is now. This is not how I would say it, though, at all. and when I first started, when my first son was first diagnosed, if I had been looking up an establishing operation and seen this definition, I think I would have thrown the book and been so frustrated and said, how on earth does this definition help me? So if that's you, let's see what our working definition is. Creating circumstances so the child will be more likely to be successful. I think that's a really good working definition. It's certainly not as specific, and I want to help you to understand what an EO is. So if we want the child to do something, and let's say that we're working on potty training, and we know that if a child has liquids in their body, then they're more likely going to need to urinate, right, on a regular basis. And we can sort of take some data ahead of time and see about how long after they drink, is it 15 minutes, is it 20 minutes, is it longer than that? But if we give them a big cup of water or juice or whatever, how long before they're going to need to urinate in the toilet? And what we can do is set ourselves up for success. So an establishing operation might be that we give the child a bunch of salty snacks, which means they're more likely to want to drink the water, and they drank the bunch of water. So now we're set up for success. We've got the timer set, and we're going to go in 10 minutes. We're more likely to get the child to need to use the bathroom because we set up circumstances that we're going to make it likely that they were going to have to pee. That's an EO. So, and I think it's important to note that sometimes we try to work on things and be successful for things that are workable, right? But let's imagine that we were trying to get the child to tantrum, okay? Which we would never do, right? But let's imagine for a second that we were crazy people and we wanted the child to tantrum. We could set a child up to be successful with that by creating circumstances in which the child was more tired, they hadn't been fed, so they were hungry, they were frustrated, right? And we would be more likely to, that would all be establishing operation too. We put it in the positive here in terms of, because I think most of the time when we're trying to create an EO, we're creating an EO for success for a target. But there are lots of what they call motivating operations that happen, like we're tired today. And, so I am more likely to mess up today because I'm tired. I like to think of the things that we have on board. What do we have on board that's creating circumstances where we're more likely to be successful in creating behavior? Is it behavior we want? Is it behavior we don't want? So if we are working on a lesson with a child and we say, okay, I want the child to pee in the toilet. Then our EO would be to set up the circumstances before so that we've created an environment in which the child is more likely to succeed. If it's not crystal clear to you, hang around, because it gets, when you take the individual circumstance, it's much clearer why we stop and think about EOs, why we create them. The thing with EOs is they're things that we're constantly creating to set ourselves up for success. Okay, we also always have a question of the day, and the question of the day is meant to get you thinking. Sometimes we say something to hopefully help you to download and vent, because we know that there's frustration and some grief and some sadness sometimes along the road. But sometimes we want you to brag, and sometimes we want you to get in a place where you see that it's not all bad, right? Because it isn't, it can't be. And it may be that you're in a circumstance right now where a lot is bad, but it's amazing how you can still find something to be grateful for, something to be happy about. And it's nice to visit those places from time to time in your head. You know what I'm saying? So our question today is, when is your child happiest? This is a really great question for all of us to ask of our children. This is a great question to ask of ourselves. We're so busy in our lives and we have so much to do, right? And we have so much to overcome. But if we take a moment to think about, okay, when is our child the happiest? You may be in a place right now where it's that your child is happiest when they have an opportunity to engage in self-stimulation. self-stimulatory behavior. Okay, we can take a breath with that and say, that's our truth for today. This is not the world's worst place to be in, right? It may seem like it sometimes, but it isn't. Because I got to tell you that self-stimulatory behavior can be worked on, right? On a realm, on a continuum, if your child, if that's when they're happiest is engaging in self-stimulatory behavior, that's better than when they're happiest is hurting themselves, okay? So, which can also be a self-stimulatory behavior. So, we got to find, it could always be worse, right? I know sometimes it doesn't seem like it. But if we know what makes your child happiest, and if it's something that's productive, that's something we have to work with. That's in our plus column, right? If we know when your child is happiest and it isn't something that we want to continue, then we can start to begin to look for what could replace that and continue to make the child happy. I know it's really hard sometimes that as parents, if there's something that our children engage in that helps them to be calm and get themselves together, it can be hard to encourage them to let go of that. It's one of the things that I talk a lot about with experts is that that's an emotional thing for us, just like the food thing. Taking away their favorite foods if it's something that's harmful to them can be a really emotional thing for us because we think, or at least I do, and a lot of the parents that I've talked to, I don't want to speak for you, but I think, he's been through so much. Really, we can't. My son likes to hum. He is writing the sound score to his life, and he likes to hum. When he was very little, if you did something that was exciting to him, I don't know whether it was because it happened before he saw Star Wars, so I don't think it is the R2-D2 thing, but certainly when he saw R2-D2, it was like somebody who was speaking his language. He would make those little, I can't even do it, my voice doesn't go that high, those high-pitched little mechanical noises, and when you talk to R2-D2, or when they do in the movie, the sound effects person does the, that's their way of communicating. And that really was where my son already was, quite frankly. And there was a period of time where if you showed him something and said, look, he loved Buzz Lightyear, and if you said, look, a Buzz Lightyear toy, he would make the little R2-D2 noise instead of saying cool or wow. And we needed to work on that. We gave him the replacement behavior to say cool or wow or, fabulous or whatever it was at whatever age that was appropriate. But he still hums. He still will make little noises from time to time, and I can tell when he's tired. If he's really tired and something exciting happens, he'll make the little noise again. But we had to set parameters on it, and we gave him other things to do. It's hard, though, sometimes. It's emotional. But I think starting with when is your child happiest, looking at that, if it's something that's appropriate, offering that as reinforcement whenever possible. If it's something that isn't appropriate, accepting that and saying, I'm sure, using my creative brain, I'm going to be able to find a replacement. My son is still feeling the joy when he says wow every bit as much. It's not taking anything away from him. And now he says wow, and it's appropriate, and he still has the emotion of it. And there are ways that we can do this if we take the time and get creative enough, which is a lot of what we do here. Take the time and get creative. All right, so I would like to hear from you. When is your child happiest? Please write into us. You can tweet into us now. You can write in on your questions. You can write in on Facebook, and we're going to check back later to kind of compare some notes, which I think is going to be really fun. So that'll be interesting. All right, we also always have a topic of the day. And our topic today, as it was all last week, since we're only here for the day this week, I wanted to leave it the same: challenging behavior. This was something that we talked about a lot with people up at the conference, and there were certainly, you guys, I so wish you'd been there, and I want to encourage everybody to go if you can next year. And I understand that there are lots of mini conferences around the country and the world throughout the year, but this big, huge conference, I'll tell you, the big disappointment for me was that I couldn't get to everywhere and everything. There was too much going on. It was so overwhelming. But there were people there who were talking about challenging behavior and things that they were doing with real children that were working and solving problems. Oh my goodness, it was like a festival of solving problems. So we're going to share some of that, and everything that we talk about today, we're going to talk about through the guise of challenging behavior, and we'll continue on through that. So our schedule today, we've got a motor tip for you. We're going to talk our healthy eating tip because it's Tuesday. It's that time of the week when you all hate me because I say let's try to be as healthy as possible with our kids. And then I'm so excited about this. At the 11 o'clock hour, we're going to have Ashley Colis with us, and she is going to talk to us about babysitting. And here's what's fabulous. Ashley is an ABA therapist and who is getting her master's degree, and she's been working with kids for a number of years, but she also has been a babysitter and done respite care. And she's going to be coming in and talking to us specifically about the kinds of things that we want to look for in a babysitter, the kinds of questions that we want to ask of a babysitter, the kinds of things that we want to do to be able to hook ourselves up with respite and babysitting care that's productive when we're in an ABA program. Because I know I feel this way, and I know many of you have written in and said, I don't have babysitters because I'm so afraid they're going to mess it up. I'm so afraid they're going to reinforce behavior that we've worked so hard to eliminate. I'm so afraid that they're going to have a tantrum, that something's going to happen, this loss of control. And so we don't get to do the things that we want to do in life and have the time to connect with the people that we want to connect with, our partners, our spouses, if we could solve this, so we could solve babysitting so it's productive for our children, how productive would it be for us, and how much better would we be being efficient, effective members of the team if we come back with our batteries recharged? So we're going to talk with Ashley and get the skinny on the kinds of things that we should be asking, looking for, training, and doing that kind of thing. So really excited about that. It's a topic that I really want to have solved in my life, and I know many of you have written in and said the same thing. So that's what we're doing today, and throughout the day I'm going to tell you little snippets about this conference. Whew. I'm still sorting through it in my head. It was really amazing. All right, stick with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
I am grateful for Autism Speaks because they allow families like me to have hope.
They're working towards having these children live better lives.
There's a space for you. Yeah, there's a world for you, and there's a community that is behind you.
And one that has really been able to be the singular voice for people who are involved with and who care about autism.
I do have autism, but I don't let that become a disability for me. Autism Speaks is going to continue to help those who need it, and just look at all the stuff they've done so far and you will be impressed.
3, 2, 1.
And you need to support the walks. We have to raise awareness, but we also have to raise funds to do the work.
I'm grateful for Autism Speaks for one main reason, is they are allowing me to focus on the research.
The work that Autism Speaks has been doing is critical for keeping autism research on the radar screen.
We proclaimed 2 April as the World Autism Awareness Day. I'm very proud of the UN and thankful Autism Speaks.
Getting the health mandate bill passed in New Jersey particularly, we needed to be able to make an argument, not just do this because it's the right thing to do, but do it because it's cost effective.
When everyone else told me nothing was wrong with my son, I got information from a website that told me something wasn't right.
I am so proud of Autism Speaks for creating these beautiful ad campaigns, which have reached people who are not affected by autism and have also created a greater climate of compassion and understanding.
It's been really great for Bachman to have gotten involved with Autism Speaks early on. I think everybody here feels like they really make a difference.
To make sure that we generate as much money as we can for Autism Speaks so we can all solve this puzzle together.
There's no way we could have come this far without our families, without our supporters to date, but there's so much farther we have to go. And everybody's invited to join this cause. We need all the help we can get to make the difference we know we can make.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters, in Tarzana, California. It's time for our motor tip of the week. And I wanted to talk specifically about how important it is to get our kids moving. I want to talk a little bit about gross motor. Now, we can break gross motor things down into little tiny increments and teach any gross motor skill to our children. It's just a matter of sometimes we have to do a task analysis on it and break it down into little itty bitty skills and chain it together. So you work on this little part of it and then you work on this little part of it and you put them all together. In some cases, it's a matter of, well, I think in all cases, it's a matter of giving them opportunity. But I do think that there is a measure of getting our kids moving. So important that we actually teach them how to skip, and so important that we teach them so that they actually know how to run and all kinds of things. But if we can get our kids moving, having a motor difficulty is not really a part of the diagnosis. If you have a child with Asperger's, there is a part of the diagnosis that is about being less coordinated, physically coordinated. But otherwise, it's not a part of the diagnosis. So we can make moving fun, and we can pair it with a whole bunch of other things that we're trying to teach a child. Say, for instance, we're trying to teach a child to follow directions. We're doing that lesson because that's a cognitive lesson, and it's a really important lesson to do, to be able to first to follow one-step directions, which sometimes is just nonverbal imitation. So getting the child saying, reach up, and the child reaches up, and we reinforce them, right? Then we can move on to getting a child to follow directions, which is a two-step thing. So we can say, do this, and we step 2 steps to the left, and they have to take the 2 steps to the left. Or maybe we step to the left and we hop. So it's 2 things in a row, and we can work and add on so that it's 5 things in a row. And when you stop and think about it, we're getting a child to follow directions, but it's kind of the same thing as when we're teaching a child to dance, for instance, or something else. And we want children to be able to look at us and have them do what we do, right? It's a say-do lesson. And that's going to be really important for school and for making friends and having social relationships with people. So we could put all of these things together, could we not? And I think it's really fun. One of the things that we see a lot with kids is that they tend to, not all of them, but they tend to have energy. And when we allow them an outlet for the energy and we allow things to move through their bodies, they have a tendency, not in all kids, have a tendency to be more focused when they come back. My son's kindergarten teacher, and I'm sure she's not the only one, but she's a fabulous kindergarten teacher. She called it getting rid of the kids' sillies. And so they would all stand up and they would have this specific set of like 5 dances that they would do to get rid of their sillies. And there's actual exercise that a lot of therapists will do with kids who have that kind of energy and need to be focused, and it's called spaghetti arms, where they hold on to their arms and the kids are told to let their arms relax, and the therapist does this and the kids' arms go like this. It's a very silly sort of feeling, but it helps kids to be more focused when they come back. Not all of them. So something to try with your child and to note, okay, is my child more focused or not? But we saw with our child that if he had the opportunity to move his body, that first of all, if he had the opportunity to move his body in a way that he could experiment and that wasn't rigid, that then when we went to rigid movement and I'm going to say something, you do it, he was more likely to be successful. So there's that EO for you, right? Giving him an opportunity to move his body however he wants before we do say do, so he's more likely to be successful. Not true in all children, but definitely was true in my child. But he was also more likely to be focused on all of his different lessons if he had the opportunity to move his body. And when we were in early intensive behavior intervention, there was a lot of play that was happening. And I got to tell you, if you're doing intensive ABA, there better be some intensive play going on so that your child is finding it reinforcing, right? And that better include some movement, but still, it's a lot of demands, a lot of attention, a lot of demands, and we all need to decompress, right? So we had this thing in our house that we would do when he was little, and I've been thinking about this lately, and I said something to my husband the other day about we got to institute it again, that when the last therapist had left the house and I was cooking dinner, we would throw some music on and we would dance. My husband would dance and my son would dance and I would dance while I was cooking and we would dance while we were getting food on the table, so that he had a way of moving his body and getting that stuff out. It was good for us too. And I do think anytime you've been doing one thing and you need to stop and do something else, they say move your body for a few minutes to shake off what you were doing before so you can refocus. That's for all of us. So really wonderful to give our kids that opportunity. And I have to say, and somebody wrote in about this recently, about can video games be helpful for this? And we had Dr. Jonathan Tarbox saying here, it sure can't hurt if they're moving gross motor. And that there are some of these video games now that they can actually see an outline of themselves, or some of them see themselves on screen and have the person next to them dancing or doing something and have them do it so that they can compare. You know, it's not that we all need to run out and spend hundreds of dollars on expensive video game equipment, but if you already have it, what a great reinforcing way to get your child moving and to see if that helps them to focus, and also to be having that say-do correspondence and being able to see and to judge whether they're being successful. There's also, you know, some of those games it says you are 96% successful, gives them a grade. Talk about feedback. You know, what a wonderful thing. But let's all try to get our kids moving, because we know that it's important to their health, right? And if it can help with other things, why not? So there's our motor tip for the day. We're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and talk about our healthy eating tip for the week. Stick with us.
Mostly the behavior started at night, but it was invading the day, where he would just speak one syllable and babble and pace around.
When she was a year old, she lost speech. She did never seem to request me for anything, even for food. He told me over the phone that I should just put her in an institution. I was devastated. I was in an institution, a hospital. Yeah, isn't that nice?
He told me that it was possible or likely that Ruffin would never be employed, that he would never work productively, that he would not know that I loved him, nor would he love me, nor would he be likely to marry.
There's a 50% chance that he won't be able to talk at all, but if he does talk, he will only be able to, you know, make simple desire requests. I want, things like that. And probably by the time he was 10, he'd be in a home.
Doreen told me that he would recover, and Doreen told me that he would go to regular kindergarten.
I really have a very normal kid now, and lots of normal worries, but not extraordinary ones.
My name is Deli Popola, and I'm one of the creators of the Hotspot.com. The Hotspot.com is an online support system for families and specialists who are affected by autism across the whole world. Share inspirational stories, find resources in their area. Hope you can join.
Welcome back. We're here and we're talking about a wide variety of different topics having to do with autism. And I gotta say that eating and feeding and keeping our children healthy, one of the really core issues that we all worry about, right? It's so important that our kids be healthy. And we constantly, I think, anytime I get together with a group of parents, food comes up. Food's a very emotional issue, but food comes up. And I think it's true for all parents, not just parents of kids on the autism spectrum by any means. We all wonder, am I doing the right thing? Am I feeding my kid the things that they need to? Are they getting the proper nutrition? And it was very interesting. We just came back from the ABAI conference, and we talked to a lot of food and feeding experts about issues that our kids deal with on the spectrum and how difficult it can be and how overwhelming it can be and how emotional it can be for the caregiver. It really is. And I think that anybody who pretends that it isn't is shortchanging what's happening, because there are so many things that we want to do for our kids, right? But the food thing has to happen at least 3 times a day, and usually with a kid it's got to happen 5 times a day. It's opportunity to second guess ourselves. It's expensive. I mean, it's supercharged with lots of things to be worried about. So we all want our children to eat healthy because we all want them to be healthy. But we want them to eat healthy and enjoy it and be happy. And there were a couple of people that we spoke to specifically that were feeding experts. And I'm thinking about Kathy Piazza in particular, who was talking about, she said, boy, you can tell children who've been through our program because they're the kids who eat their vegetables and enjoy it. And I thought that was so interesting. It really piqued my interest. And after we stopped filming, she and I were talking about my child, and she said, how does my child eat? And I said, he eats really well. The joke in our family is that my child is a bottomless pit, though, that he's a growing boy, about to be 9, very tall for his age, very tall and skinny. So, we're definitely not overfeeding him, but he tends to be hungry a lot. And I think that's true too, because he eats a lot of vegetables, and those kinds of things tend to go through you faster, but he will. He's thrilled to eat a vegetable. And, if we left him to his own devices, would he only pick other things? You betcha. Every once in a while, he'd pick a vegetable. Lives and breathes for fruit because we have to keep his fruit very much under control because he does not react well even to fruit sugar. He becomes a very silly little customer if he has too much fruit at all. But one of the things that we were talking about was that I spoke with Kathleen Piazza, was that I know a lot of people look at my child and say, well, how did you do that? How did you get your child to enjoy vegetables? And in my particular case, I really honestly believe that it was 2 things in particular. One, very important one, that I modeled it. I eat my vegetables every day. I know I don't look like it, but I do. I eat my vegetables every day in large quantity, and I love my vegetables. And so, when he was even a baby and he saw me eating vegetables, it was what mommy ate, and so it looked exciting to him because it was what I was eating. It is not what Dad eats, right? But I modeled it, and I think it's so important that we do have an expectation, and that we on a regular basis are eating the things that we have a hope that our child will eat. And I know that for some of you, you're saying, my life is so busy and I can't. But remember, we have to stay healthy too. We have to, in order to really be the most effective, efficient member of the team that we can be. We have to stay healthy. So, but there is that extra added thing of modeling that behavior for our children. We have to walk our talk, right? And if we expect our child to eat the snow peas on the plate, then we have to eat the snow peas on the plate, and we have to look like we're enjoying it. And probably we should be enjoying it. So if you're eating the snow peas on the plate and you're not enjoying it, then you got to find the way to prepare it so that it is enjoyable to you, whether that means that you put some stuff on it, not stuff that's so extremely unhealthy that it counteracts the snow peas, right? But, there are some things that there are sauces and things that you can put on things that jazz things up. You don't have to eat everything with no salt, raw. Right? If, maybe eventually you can get to that, but you don't have to start there. So really important that you model it. And also the other thing that I think the secret of our success of why we started in such a good place was because the opportunity to eat vegetables was there over and over and over again. And this is something that we hear experts talk about, is that you've got to present the foods and plan on presenting them many, many times. That and it doesn't have to be a battle, right? You can put things on the plate, and it doesn't have to be a big discussion about, are you eating it, are you not eating, you don't get this if you don't eat that. But presenting it over and over and over again helps. We've seen that in studies, that if you just simply put it on the plate, it may be that they don't get to it this month, but eventually the fact that it's there and there and there, it's sort of like desensitizing them to it. And the truth of the matter is that we don't want to raise children that when they leave us, and our hope is, right, our highest hope is that they do leave us and make the choices for themselves, that it's so limited, right? So we keep putting it on the plate, we model that we're eating it, and we're going to be, according to the statistics, that's not all we need to do, but if we do those things, we talk about EOs today, right? We set ourselves up for more success if we do that. So I encourage you to find the way to eat your vegetables and enjoy them. And trust me, we got to do another cooking segment, because vegetables should be enjoyable. And I love when I have people over to my house and we cook vegetables, because they always go, why don't I do this at home? And it doesn't have to be hard. I got to tell you that we should do, and I'm thinking out loud here, Emily, but we should do an episode just on, cooking episode just on like 5 different things to do with vegetables. Because I take whatever the seasonal vegetables are and I try to cut them up, and you can steam them or roast them, which takes very little time and effort, and then you put a sauce on them, and you can take the same vegetables and have it 5 different ways with 5 different sauces and have it taste wonderful and go with almost anything, and it's kind of an amazing thing. So we'll have to think about doing that very soon. But especially now that produce is coming in, I hope you guys are going to the farmer's market. And take your child, say, what would you like to try? Go to the farmer's market, and we're going to pick out these different things, and you pick one thing that you want to try. They're going to be drawn to colors, and that's a great thing. But model it. Model the behavior that you want to see, right? You got to eat the vegetables. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back in just a couple of minutes. Stick with us.
Welcome. I'm here today with Cecilia Knight, who is the Director of Training for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And today we're talking about how to keep kids healthy.
I think it's really important for, of course, every child to have a pediatrician that the parent is comfortable with and that the parent is seeing regularly. Someone who's an expert on autism, who understands the issues related to autism.
A lot of kids who are on the spectrum are a little bit obsessed with one area of food. Any suggestions?
I think it's really difficult for parents because many of their children either self-limit or they don't like certain textures. Their pediatricians, after testing them, see that they are deficient in iron and other nutrients that are so important. And so it does reach the levels where many parents need to seek help. Maybe from something like SOS, Specialized Outpatient Services, or another feeding clinic in their area. Someone who can address specifically, how do I get my child to eat this texture? How do I get my child to eat something other than French fries?
So what advice do you have for parents in terms of realizing what's the autism and what's something else that has to be addressed.
As we all know, every child is different, and from one child to the next on the spectrum, their symptoms are different, and what they struggle with medically is different. You do run into a problem with many physicians saying, well, that's just symptomatic of autism, and so we're not going to treat it. And I think it's really important to be sure that if they need to see a neurologist to address seizures, that they're getting that done. If they need to see a nutritionist because of the food issues, that they're getting that done, all while being treated by a pediatrician who maybe can help oversee that. But I think it's not a great idea to dismiss everything as that's just autism.
I always try to imagine a child trying to do therapy while they've got all these biological things going on, and how could they possibly concentrate?
Right. Well, our clients are just like you and I. It's very difficult to concentrate if I have a headache or if I have an upset stomach. And so I think it's really important to first give the child the opportunity to feel better, whatever that means for that child, because again, each child is very different. But I have had children that once you address a specific food allergy, then the symptoms of stomach pain or, a sty in their eye that wouldn't go away or constant diarrhea, until we addressed that medical issue, it's very difficult to concentrate on treatment.
Sure.
And then once they could address those issues, then treatment, went more the way we were hoping it would go.
Absolutely. And there's all kinds of things that would come under that heading, right? If they had sleep disorders, we already said food allergies, but what about vision problems?
Absolutely. The hard thing is, depending on the child's ability to communicate, sometimes it's difficult to have vision tested or to have hearing tested. So working in combination with someone who could help expose the child to the contingencies that would be in place, for example, for a vision test, and practicing or being prepared may help in those situations, but it's definitely a real issue.
Wow. So maybe even using your ABAI program to practice for the vision test.
Right. It's very difficult for parents to find a pediatrician often that they connect with, but I think I encourage them to keep looking for a pediatrician who has specific experience and has other clients maybe with autism, and they have a good rapport with other parents. Someone who can listen to their concerns about sleep or about seizures or about eating and not dismiss them. Because, sometimes we uncover things that are surprising or that were unexpected, just like with the rest of us. So it's important to keep looking for answers, I think, to all of those issues.
And the healthier they are, the happier they're going to be, and the quicker they're going to learn.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. And this last weekend, Emily Goodwin, who's our technical director, and I journeyed up to Seattle for the ABAI conference. It's ABAI International. And I have to tell you, I've heard about this conference. I think the first time I heard about it actually was a year ago. And it didn't occur to me as a parent ever to go to it. Of course, I didn't ever go to any conference because I was at home with my child and we were having intensive ABA in our home. And I would always say, who are these people who go to these conferences, the parents, because where's their child when they're doing this, and who's their, I couldn't imagine, and I didn't know how they could afford it. I got to be honest with you. So I didn't get to any conferences as a parent. It wasn't until maybe 2 years ago that I went to the first ever conference that I had an opportunity to go to and went, wow, this is amazing. There's a whole lot of information here. And I met a lot of parents at different conferences, and I really see the benefits of it. And it was really interesting to me to be at this conference and see all these psychologists and BCBAs. Everywhere you looked, you were tripping over BCBAs. It was really kind of amazing. And students who were there gaining information because they're going to school to be BCBAs. Very, very interesting, completely overwhelming. I'm going to say that, but in a really good way. My mother quilts, and I remember her talking about how she went into a quilting store once, and she couldn't believe it. Like, she had a little bit of sensory overload because there were so many things to look at, and she knew that there was no possibility in the amount of time that she had that she was going to be able to look at and figure out all the quilting things, and she knew she was going to have to leave and know that she was leaving important information about quilting that had the potential to be life-changing to her quilt making behind, and so it was a little overwhelming to her. That was what I experienced this weekend. It was so amazing. And one of the things that both sides of the fence here, I was kind of sad that there weren't more parents there. And yet there were more parents at this conference than have ever been there. So I was excited to hear that. And I was excited to hear that there were parents at all, because I have to be honest that I always thought that this was a conference just for professionals, that you had to have certain credentials to get in, that's what the criteria was, and anybody else, you just couldn't go. I didn't know that parents were allowed. Well, guess what? We are allowed, and teachers are allowed. And there were teachers there, and there were parents there. I don't think as many as anybody would like to see, but you know what else was really remarkable? Was the parents who were there. Every single professional person that was there was so excited that there were parents there. So excited. You know how you look at things from one side of the fence for a really long time and you think you understand it, and then you go stand on the other side of the fence and go, I never knew that it looked like that on this other side of the fence. And that's exactly, I mean, it was so interesting to me to hear from all these professionals their perspective on parents. And they were so excited to have parents there sharing information that they had. Every single one to a person. And I mean, there were thousands of BCBAs there, and they were so excited. And as I introduced myself to people and I was talking to them, and I would say, oh, by the way, I'm a parent of a child on the spectrum. It was so interesting to me, the change that came over them that was such a positive thing. I have to say, I was so welcomed and encouraged to come in, and they would say, oh, well, let me take you to this person. You have to meet this person. Or I would ask a question about something and say, oh, who you want to talk to is this person. And everybody was just so welcoming and delightful. But again, oh, you guys, there was so much going on. There were 2 entire buildings full of conference rooms that I'll have to pull out the book and show you. There was a book for every day of the conference of things that were going on. Even if you just stayed in the first where you signed into the conference, there was a huge conference room that one part of it was books. Just the most wonderful autism bookstore that you could ever imagine. Just tons and tons of books, and most of the authors were there so that you could talk to them about their books. Oh, it was just one of those. I want to do, Wallace from Wallace and Gromit, where he does the little, because it's that good. And then there was a resource fair that was there that was amazing. And there was a whole other section of the conference that was set up for endless poster sessions. Now, I didn't know what a poster session was before I went, but they had numbered, sort of like booths, but they're not booths. They were just, standing boards where they could put up huge posters showing a research project that they had worked on, and one of the authors of the research project would stand next to the poster during a prescribed time so that you could go through, look at the research on the board, and ask questions. Oh, and it was segmented in different topics having to do with ABA, and so autism being one of the topics. And this would change several times a day. So there might be 50 people in presenting research on autism from noon to 12, and then there would be a period of time when they would have an opportunity to take down their posters, and then there would be 50 more presenting from 5 to 7, and that would just be 50 people presenting, showing their papers on autism, but there would be 100 more that might be working on things that had some relation to autism or no relation to autism. So there might be 70 things at a time that would be of interest to a parent of a child on a spectrum, where you could go and literally talk to the person and say, what did you research? Why did you research it? What did you discover? What did you find out? What are you going to do next? Amazing. And we tried to videotape as many of them as we could. And when I tell you that I just would have wanted to extend time to get all the different things. But one of the things that I can think of that I'm so excited to talk to you guys about were that there were 2 women who had done a study on teaching shoe tying. Oh, you guys, it was so good. It was so good. I had such a good time. Another person on the effect of that I can think of, and some of these people were graduate students. Some of them were, fully licensed BCBAs. So it was different during each poster session. Really amazing, you guys. The amounts of studies. So we're going to bring some of what we brought back to you next week and in the coming weeks. I can't wait to share that with you. But I took this time because I want you to know this happens every Memorial Day weekend. It's in a different city every year. And next year it's going to be in Minneapolis. And there were kids there, by the way. There were people who brought their kids, both people who were parents, and there were people who were there who were professionals that had their kids. There weren't a lot of kids, but there were kids. And I just want you to know, so that if it's something that you're interested in, that you can start to put it on your radar, that it happens every Memorial Day weekend. You wouldn't be disappointed. One of the first things that we did on the first day that we were there, we talked to a couple of ladies who run a seminar every year where they meet with parents and teachers and say, if you've never been here before, this is a huge conference. If you're not careful, you could miss some important things. So they break it down so that it makes more sense, so that you can, this catalog, I'll show it to you when we come back after the next break, which I figured it out by the second day, how to use it as this wonderful resource. It's pretty phenomenal. So if you go, you'll want to go to that seminar first. But in any case, I encourage you to go if you can. If you can't, wait. I mean, how many years has it taken me? And I went to my first one, but you guys, it was fabulous. Really exciting. Okay, it's time, or in fact, we're a little bit late for the A word, but I wanted to take the time to talk about that. But the A word, wonderful, inspirational documentary being made by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed when he was 2, is getting early intensive behavioral intervention. And we're following him and his family as they go through this process. And I really love this because we get to see the arc. We're showing the same episode that we were showing last week because we had a short week last week and we're only having today this week. But let's take a look at it again and we'll talk some more about it after the episode. Here is the A word.
A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W.
Talking a lot this morning.
Now I down my pieces. Next time.
Won't you?
No say with me.
That's right, kiddo. Very good. Hey, Jack Riley, 1 more minute. Say okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Do you want to play something else for now? What do you want to play?
Pancake.
You want to play pancakes? Oh, is this the sign for pancakes? What do you want to work for, Jack Riley? Do you want to work for puzzle, for trains, for jumping on the bed? What do you want to work for? More jumping? Okay.
Pancake. Pancake.
Okay. Sit down here, though.
Pancake.
You want pancakes? Can you say that better? Say, I want pancakes.
I want pancake.
Okay, should we go see where the pancakes are then?
Okay.
All right. Let's go find Dad. Come on. Come with me. Walk with me. And we'll go find Dad, okay? All right. Can you open the door?
Turn. There you go. Nice. Let's go see where those pancakes are. See, I'm hungry. Ask you quick questions, okay? All right. Okay, look. Okay. What's your name? What's your name? Nice job. How old are you? Good job. Sit down, though. Okay. Where do you live?
Jessica teaches Jack Riley other social ID questions such as where do you live and what's your last name.
There you go. Nice job. Here you go. Slow down. There you go. Hi.
You look cute. I love you.
Group kiss. Group kiss. Ready? 1, 2. Oh, nice hands.
Nice hands. Nice hands. Nice hands. That's
Nice hands.
Nice hands get you more attention than bad hands.
Big brother. Who's big brother?
Who's a big brother? Yes.
Where's the little sister?
Where's little sister?
Where? Is she here? Is that
Right
little sister?
there.
There
Right,
she
that's
is.
right.
Can she have a kiss? Can little sister have a kiss? Thank you.
I hope.
Jack Riley is needing less prompting to appropriately gain attention. Jessica only gestures to get him to ask. They introduced the skill about 7 weeks ago, and it's becoming less contrived and is occurring naturally in situations. Here's a look from 7 weeks ago, when Jessica first introduced gaining attention. In the beginning, she tempts Jack Riley with an item he wants, then prompts him the whole way, gesturing and physically showing him what to do and what to say.
Jessica. I want pancakes. Hey, look at me when you say it. Say, I want pancakes.
As time goes by and the skill becomes more natural, the prompting will completely fade away.
Ready? Okay, show them how you can use a straw. You gotta go all the way. Show me. There you go. Good job.
Feeding used to be very time-consuming and difficult for Cheryl and Mike. Jack Riley would swat away food fed to him and would refuse to self-feed. He now feeds himself and even uses a fork. His diet, though, is still limited, but it's growing. Drinking has also been an issue for Jack Riley. He's typically only drank out of baby bottles or bottles with a hard nipple top. They've tried getting Jack Riley to drink from a cup, but every time they would present it, he would try to lap it up like a cat, anticipating all the fluid to come rushing at him. Now they have introduced drinking from a straw, so he has an item to drink from that is age appropriate.
I'm gonna suck it up. You wanna do that again? Yeah. Wanna do that again? One more time. One more time, and then you can play. Yay! Very good, Jack. There you go.
You guys got that exact same pitch level there. I don't know how you duplicate.
Do you want the purple iPhone? Okay.
Okay. What's the matter?
You can have applesauce.
Hey.
You can have it. You can have it. Come here. Can you show me? Bite for mommy. Your turn. Do you know? Jack Riley, say, I don't want banana. Okay. What do you want then? What do you want then? I want. Okay. We have a spoon, Daddy.
One of the food items Jack Riley eats a lot of are bananas. For some reason, though, seeing a banana really upsets Jack Riley. He enjoys eating it, but hates the sight of it. One of the issues is that biting solid food is very aversive to him.
Fear of the banana. Someday we'll tell him he eats one every day.
More awareness than it was in the yogurt, so we have to go in baby steps with it. That's fine with me.
This is history. I might drink the whole thing.
With like no prompting, no.
Yeah,
you're right. Okay, kiddos. See ya. Have a good weekend. Say thanks, Miss Jessica. Can you say bye? Can you say bye, Jessica?
Look at her. Where is Jessica? Where is Jessica? There she is.
Thank you. Oh, thanks. Just in case you were wondering.
You're Jessica. You are.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a great weekend, Jessica.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I love this series, The A Word, and I want to encourage all of you, if you haven't been watching, you can go back and watch from the beginning. You can rewatch this episode. You can watch further episodes to see this arc of this little boy and how he's beginning to learn on the YouTube channel that they have that is just for Autism Live. It's really quite remarkable. And I love that you're seeing, I think, what is a very representative picture of what it's like for the family. You're getting to see, you're getting to see this little boy and the arc of how he's learning, but you're also getting to see the family and what it's like emotionally for them. You're only seeing little snippets, of course, because, it's not one of these things where you're watching hours upon hours, that they're showing 3 minutes out of a week or 2 weeks. And we're only seeing one therapist, although there are multiple therapists who come in and work on these programs with Jack Riley. So I do like to point that out, but I think they're doing a pretty representative job of showing what the emotional journey is like and how frustrating it is sometimes because you take 1 step forward and 2 steps back, or new behavior crops up, or that it just takes time. And it's amazing when you're in it, how it feels like the time goes by so slowly. If you'd asked me in the middle of our first year or second year of ABA, and I would have said to you, man, it's just so slow, right? And now I look back and go, wow, that's amazing how much they taught my kid in that little space of a time. But when you're in it, it feels entirely different, doesn't it? But really important to see the arc and to see that some of these smaller lessons, how they fit together into bigger lessons. And we're seeing them very slowly desensitize Jack Riley. The banana was such a huge thing in the beginning. Watch back in those early episodes. They show a banana and the child is traumatized, right? And now he's just down to a little bit of whimpering and not caring for it. Well, that's improvement. And I always like to say improvement is improvement, right? And it's all good. We're moving in the right direction, and that's a really important thing. So I really encourage you to watch this show and keep up with this little boy and how wonderfully he's doing. I just think it's remarkable. Next week, we'll start to show another episode from, one of the things I wanted to comment on this, you see at the end that he's gotten his reinforcement, and we know that these technical devices, electronic devices, are so reinforcing to a lot of our kids, right? But you notice that his head is buried in the thing and he's watching it. They're saying, you need to say goodbye. And they get to the point where the therapist has to cover the screen and say Jack Riley. And the mom says, where's Jessica? And he points to her and he gives his attention. It's really important, even when we've given reinforcement, that we on a regular basis make sure that our kids aren't ignoring us. It's really hard. It's something that my mom was with my son during this weekend while I was away. When my husband was at work, and my mom and I were talking about that. She said, boy, he loves to play his video games, and if I don't check in with him on a regular basis, it becomes hard to. And I said, oh, yeah, you can't let him go for a long period of time. You got to ask him questions, and he knows that if he doesn't answer the question, the game gets paused or turned off, because he has to be interactive, because they can go so far. For those kinds of kids, they can focus on something so hard that they lose track of where they are. We really got to make sure that we're constantly yanking them out and giving them that practice of, I'm focusing on this. Oh, look, I'm focusing at you. I'm focusing on this. I'm answering your question and acknowledging you. It's a really good thing to do with our kids. Even when they're in reinforcement, we can be doing that. Oh, you get to play with your toy. Yep. And then, look at mommy and do this and whatever. Say, yes, mommy. Is enough every few minutes so that we don't lose them into that focus where they can't come back. It's really hard for them sometimes. So I got out this book. This was the book for the event. You can see this is, and we referred to it as a tome. It is. It's a heavy book. And I was just looking at terms of, because the conference has actually not ended yet. It ends this afternoon at like 2 o'clock. And so I was just looking at the kinds of things that we missed this morning while we were here. Just makes my mouth water. And you could see there are individual events here for today, and as we look at the book, they classify them for topics of, what might be of interest to you. So when it says ought, then you see, so here this morning at 9 o'clock in the ought category, the conditioning and implementation of reinforcement and reinforcement systems for children with autism. And then they have 3 different people that are going to talk about, one is about high functioning children, another one is on preference and using differential reinforcement to reduce elopement. So interesting topics. Another one that was this morning, when believing is not enough, the systematic evaluation of fad treatments for autism and developmental disabilities, and talking about brushing, because a lot of us will go to an OT and the OT will say, well, your child is a prime candidate for brushing, and actually giving research and showing us, is it effective in reducing stereotypy, that kind of thing. Another one, which I would have loved to have been to, looking at the effectiveness of weighted vests to reduce aggression and self-injurious behavior, because before we started ABA, boy, that's everybody wanted to put a vest on my child. It didn't work for him. They had him in a vest, they had him in a weighted blanket. I was like, well, why don't we just put him under lead and see what he does then? We'll just get a girder and put it on top of him, and then maybe he won't. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So looking at what else? Visual strategies to support the initiation of social interactions and sociodramatic play in children with autism. And yep, you kind of need a dictionary to go through and go, okay, what does this mean? But 3 topics about that. Treatment of food selectivity in children with autism spectrum disorder. And 3 different topics having to do with that. Looking at what else, because there were so many of them. Now, there are a bunch of them that don't have to do with autism. Because remember, it isn't all about autism. Using verbal behavior approach to teach skills to children diagnosed with autism, and 4 different topics there. One on manding. So pretty impressive. Looking to see what else. I know during the 10:30 to 11:20 session, there are a bunch more that are here, and one in particular about cultural considerations in teaching and using ABA in different countries. So one country talking about using ABA in Iran, one in India, one in Korea, and one in non-Western countries. Absolutely fascinating. Wouldn't you love to have been there? We're going to try to pull some of these people into Skype to see if we can get them to talk about some of these topics that we couldn't be there for. But just page after page. And imagine that was today, and today's the lightest day. Page after page. I want to show you one of the poster sessions that we actually went to that was on autism, and I sat down with my pen and I said, oh, I'm just going to circle the ones that I specifically want to go to. Can you see? I don't know if you can see, they're all circled. Every possible thing. I think there might have been one thing here that I didn't circle. So amazing. And there were 43 of them, plus a couple others from the, I couldn't get through all of them in the 2 hours. I was like my mom in the quilt store. So many things that I wanted to talk, so little time and so much information. But you know what was also lovely is that had the opportunity while I was there to connect with people, and if I didn't have time to talk, to get their card, to say, let's get you on the show so that they can talk to all of you and that you guys can all get a feeling for. And I don't mean to make, if you can't get to conferences, I don't mean to make you feel bad because you can't get there. We're trying to bring as much of the information that was available at the conference to you here in a way that you can look back on it, 3 weeks from now or 3 years from now. But I do think there's something to be said for, if your schedule is conducive to it, to going to something like this to learn. It's amazing what you can find out to be able to help yourself, help your child. So really remarkable. That was the ABAI conference, and we'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks. We need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to look at your viewer responses from today's question, which was, when is your child happiest? I'm really looking forward to this. Stick with us. We're going to be back in just a minute.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms, detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity, brief and visually appealing video tutorials, a variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I am in the process of bringing up on my phone because my Facebook is not working on my computer, and I want to see what you guys sent to us today to answer the question of the day. So when one thing doesn't work, of course, like we do with our children, we have to try another way, right? Okay, so when in doubt, this is why we have smartphones, right? And it's bringing it up. It's very slow. All right. Okay, so our question today was, when is your child happiest? And we talked about the fact that we want to know this for lots of different reasons, because we can use whatever this is as a reinforcer, right? If it's something that's appropriate at all, it can definitely be a reinforcer. If it's something that isn't appropriate and our children are happiest doing it, we can take a really good look at it and see what it is that's reinforcing about it and try to give a replacement behavior that makes them just as happy. Because we're not in the business of making our children miserable, right? We want them to be happy. So, and I think it's interesting what makes our children happy. So listen to these. Somebody wrote in, when she is in the water. Another person says when she's in the car. Another person said in the water. We're seeing a little bit of a theme here. At the park. In the water. We have 3 for in the water. In the water or on a huge slide like the ones at amusement parks or the inflatable ones. Water or outside. With mommy. In the water. Water is very much a winner so far. On the computer, he's becoming amazing on it. That's pretty cool. At home with his mommy. Watching Cars 2 with no one bugging him. Well, from time to time we need to bug them, right? We were just talking about that. Painting or doing artwork. Now, let's see if I can get it to bring up the rest of it, and it won't. Let's try this. But I think it's interesting that so many people are writing in and saying water. And anytime we see something that the kids are going to enjoy, there are lots of different ways that we can use that to our benefit. Of course, for a lot of us, it's the time of year when, it went to the wrong place. Not helpful. Sorry, I meant to do this before, but I thought that it was going to work on my computer. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it just doesn't. But imagine that we have a child who likes to be in the water, and it's the time of year for a lot of us when we can be in the water. Well, that's the kind of thing that we can use for reinforcement, especially something big like that that's going to take a little time and thought and planning, right? Because you don't just jump into the pool usually with your clothes on. No, I can't. It won't do it for me. I don't know why. But imagine that we have a token economy system, and we say to the child, and we've got it planned in our head that let's say that you're doing a session in the morning where you or your therapist are going to work with your child, and you have a certain amount of things that you want to accomplish in the morning, and then there's going to be lunch and a break, and then maybe there's going to be some more learning that's going to happen in the afternoon during the summer. And you can set yourself up and decide with your child's skills and say, okay, here's the sticker chart. Now, you might decide that your child needs their reinforcement to come on a really fairly regular basis, and that you haven't worked up to waiting as much for reinforcement. So maybe you've got your token economy and you say, all right, you've got to earn 10 of these stickers, and as soon as you earn 10 of these stickers, that's when we're going to take a break and we're going to go swimming before lunch. That might be a case. For another child, it might be, you need to earn 5 stickers in the morning and 5 stickers in the afternoon in order to go swimming right after dinner. Of course, we don't usually want to swim right after we eat, but making it work for your life, but having that delayed gratification so that you've got things that they're working towards. Don't we all like to have things to look forward to? And maybe giving the child a visual chart and saying, first we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. And if you get these stickers, then we're going to go swimming. If it's a time of year for you where you can't really go swimming, or you don't have access to the swimming pool and it's not going to be an easy thing for you, whether it's the sprinkler, getting one of those crazy sprinklers, or if it's really cold where you are this time of year. I know those of you in Australia are going into winter at this point. Some of our kids like to play in just a pie pan full of water. That was one of the things that way back when, we're going to have at the top of the hour, we're going to have Ashley Colis in with us talking about babysitting and respite care. But I remember as a babysitter, one of the first things that I ever learned was to have a pie pan, like a little aluminum pie pan. And that if a child was starting to fuss, that you put literally 2 teaspoons of water in the pan and set it in front of the baby and let them splash that water, and whatever was happening goes away because it's really reinforcing to a small baby. Well, we can still let kids play in a pie pan of water if that's something that feels good, or taking a bath in the middle of the day, taking a shower in the middle of the day to calm down. My goodness, that if somebody likes the water and that's a really reinforcing thing, we can do that, right? Or playing with water toys. There are lots of endless possibilities of things that we can do to make that water reinforcing. I don't know where we were a couple of weeks ago, but it was really hot. Really, really hot. And my son took off his hat and he said, "Mom, would you pour water on my head?" And I had forgotten that was something that we always did when he was little, when he would get overheated, because we'd be much more likely to get a tantrum or meltdown if he got overheated. And I could always see he would get the pink in his cheeks. And what we would do is take his hat and put a little bit of water in it and put his hat on. And he thought that was hilarious because the water would trickle down really slowly through his hair and cool him off. And he thought it was great fun. It felt good. And he said, "Would you pour water on my head?" And I poured a little bit of water on his head, and we laughed and laughed and laughed about it. But if the water is what's really reinforcing, that's a great thing, because we can have that be appropriate and we can have them work for it. And I'll look forward to hearing more. Sorry that I can't get to more of them because it's not working on my computer and I don't know why. But sometimes that's just what it is. All right, we're going to take a little bit of a break, and when we come back, we actually have on schedule to talk about a cognition tip. So stick with us, back in a minute.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that, they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really, really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you, and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules, and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz, and once you pass that quiz you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back. It's time for our little cognition tip of the week in teaching senses. And, you know, we have experts come on from time to time and we talk about ABA in a global sense, DTT and NET. And of course, I am not an ABA expert. I'm not a behavior expert. I'm a mom who's tried to take some of these things that I have learned over the years from the experts and apply them to my individual child. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in particular in terms of cognition was senses and how important teaching senses is. And there are really great lessons, by the way, available in Skills that help you to teach senses and introduce it in a DTT format. Really amazing. It's in the cognition curriculum. I think it's so beneficial. And I'll tell you what, senses, teaching the senses is such a cornerstone to moving on to more advanced lessons. And I know a lot of you out there, you've got kids all over the spectrum, right? Some of you have got children who are very young and the skill set is very limited, right? You can teach senses to those children, which is really amazing and is going to help you down the road. Some of you have got kids who are kind of in the middle of things, you know, maybe they're like 6, 7, and 8. They've got some skills, but you're seeing as they go to school, things are getting harder and harder, and you're kind of hitting a brick wall socially. Senses, really important to teach to those kids and get it 100% clear so that you can move on to sensory perspective taking. And then some of you have kids who are older and they could be either end of the spectrum, and still senses is going to be important to those kids too, because if this skill isn't there, it makes so many other things along the way harder or unattainable, which I don't know about you, I don't want to settle for that. That's just not an option, right? So let's say that we have an 18-year-old college student who's doing very well and very high functioning, Asperger's, and moving through their life and doing a fabulous, fabulous job, and they're in college and they're doing wonderfully, but they report back that they don't feel like their social life is what they would like it to be. Whether it's that they don't have, love interests or friends or the opportunity to go out with a group of people, that they're not successful at that. Well, senses is going to be a really important thing to go back and pick up. I always talk about, the Swiss cheese thing that we're all walking around and we have skills and we all have deficits, right? And some of those deficits, if we wanted to do something, we'd have to go back and plug those holes. And we can do that with our kids. And one of the big things that we see in terms of empathy and not being able to look at things from other people's perspectives is that if we don't fully have senses, then we can't get to sensory perspective taking, which is going to make it really hard for us to get to anything else. Like thinking about what people think about us or thinking about what other people are thinking about, taking other people's perspectives. And it's a really great way to do it, starting with the senses. So senses is going to be so important for everybody, absolutely everybody. And how do we teach that? Well, again, in Skills, they're going to give you the great introductory into introducing each one of the senses, doing it in a very specific manner so that the kids begin to get it. But then once they get it, you got to take it out into the environment. And I love this, taking senses out into the environment, because if you've got a child and you're out in the community and the child is starting, you can feel it, right? After a while, while as a parent, you know when your child is getting off track. You've had some good behavior and you're towards the end of I was in I'm going to say it, I was in a Walmart with my mother and my child last night, and it was towards getting close to dinner time, and I could just sense that my son was getting ready and he was starting to ask questions like, how much longer are we going to be here? You know what I mean? You know, which he certainly heard his father say. And I was kind of talking to him and giving him information, but I could see that it was getting close to dinner, and he'd already said, you know, I'm getting hungry. So very wonderful that he could say those things to me, and I was hearing them and knowing where he was, but I had a couple of things that I needed to get done. Now, my son is doing really well, and he's had many years of ABA, so that I'm at a place where I can notice where he's at. He's at a place where he can notice where he's at, that he's saying to me, I'm hungry. How much longer are we going to be here? I'd like to go home and eat. He's expressing himself, telling me what his physical state is, and that he's uncomfortable. He didn't say I'm uncomfortable, but I'm hungry means I'm uncomfortable, right? So I'm hearing all of this, and you know, and I'm aware of the fact that we need to get moving towards the end, but I got to hang on to this child for a couple minutes, and I got to get through the checkout, right? And I, you know, and this is true of him now that he's 9, but it was also true of him when he was 4. It's just the stakes were a little bit higher when he was 4. It's a little bit easier now, but I can do the same thing with him, that I started calling attention to different things in the environment and saying, oh, I see something you'd like. Now, when he was 4, I would have said something like, I see something red that Jem wants, right? So I'm using visual sense and getting him to look around his environment, which takes his mind off the fact that he's uncomfortable, right? Distraction. That's exactly what it is, and it's going to buy me some time. I'm working on a lesson, keeping my child from having a tantrum or a meltdown, and we're having interaction and he's being present. Really, really important. So I see something red that Jem would like, and now he's looking around, right? And then eventually when he was older, I don't think we did it at 4, but when he was older, he would get a turn too, that he would say to me, I spy, that's exactly what we say, I spy with my little eye. And depending on, like I said, if we were working on colors, I would add a color to it. If we were working on features, I would add a feature to it. Characteristics, that I might say, I spy with my little eye someone with black hair who's wearing white shoes and, a purple top, right? So now he's looking and he's interested. And yesterday I said to him, ooh, I see something over there. And so then he started pointing things out to me. And sometimes I'll say, ooh, I smell, what is that I smell, right? So I'm not telling him what I smell, but asking him, what do you smell? And by the way, you can do that anywhere. You can be anywhere and there's always smells, and say, what do I smell? I was with him a couple of weeks ago and I said, I smell something that smells like cake. And he smelled and he said, it doesn't smell like cake to me. It smells like watermelon. And then we had a whole discussion about that. Really important to be able to do those things. And as a child gets older, to be 9 years old and I'm saying, I smell like vanilla cake. And him saying, no, I smell watermelon. How wonderful to him to identify that what he's smelling in relation to what I'm smelling, because it helps that perspective taking for him to realize that what I smell might be different than what he smells, because our noses pick out different things, and that sometimes we smell the same thing, but sometimes not. Really helps to build. So putting into the natural environment, save yourself from a tantrum, distract them, and you can make it really fun. Like, I get really animated with it, and when sometimes I make it really easy. So that I make sure I have that compliance. I go, I see something, purple and blue, that has fangs, and there's a toy right there in front of him that's huge, and he goes, oh, it's the dinosaur. And I go, you're so smart, you always win because you're so good, praise, 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 praise. And then he's like, self-esteem, and he wants to play. So senses, they're really important. We can work on this with all of our kids. Take a look at the lessons and skills, but you can do it in the natural environment, and it's a really awesome thing. Stick with us. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take on the myth of the day. And our topic today was challenging behavior, and our myth has to do with that. So we'll be back in just a minute.
Hi, I'm here today with Cecilia Knight, who is the Director of Training for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And she's going to talk to us about something that I'm not entirely clear on, tacting.
Tacting is when you make a comment on the environment, and then another person may reinforce that with non-specific reinforcement.
Can you explain to me what the difference between a tacting program is and an expressive labeling program?
In an expressive labeling program, typically the therapist holds up a card, maybe with a turkey on it, and the therapist would say, "What is this?" referencing the picture. And the child would respond, "Turkey." The child is labeling the item. With a tact, it's a comment on the environment. So it can be evoked by a smell. So if I walk into the house and I smell Thanksgiving dinner, I can say, turkey. Or if I hear gobble, 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 I can say, that's a turkey. So it's a comment on the environment, which is different than just naming the item.
How do you get a child to comment on the environment? That's got to be hard.
It is. We use different prompts. Most of the time we use vocal prompts. For example, we may look through a book and point to the picture of an item and say, "Oh, look, it's Nemo." Say, "Nemo," and then reinforce the child for responding. Or we may say, "What do you see?" Say, "Nemo." And then eventually we would want to fade our point away. So I may say, "Look, Nemo," and then the child is referencing that and then also saying, "That's right, I see Nemo." And then later fading completely away so the picture of Nemo itself evokes the comment. If we're working on something auditory, maybe we have a cow on the table and we play the environmental sound in front of them, maybe give them a vocal prompt to say, "It's a cow," and the child may say, "It's a cow." And then we might fade the visual of the cow and they just hear the sound. And we prompt them by saying, say, "It's a cow," or "I hear a cow," and then eventually fade until the sound itself evokes the comment. The goal is to get towards spontaneous tacting, where the child can walk around and comment on the novel things in the environment that he hears or sees. And so that's a great way to sort of bridge to that point. Tacting is really important to get to higher level lessons of interverbal behavior. Commenting on things that are private events, or commenting on things that I can't see that you're feeling, like your stomach hurts. But it's important to have those tacts in place so you can get to those later programs.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I know I promised you a myth of the day about challenging behavior. I'll be short and sweet about it. People think that challenging behavior is just a part of autism and that it needs to be accepted. It's not the case. We're going to be real short and to the point because we have a question that I really want to get to. But we do not have to expect challenging behavior. It is not a cut and dried part of the diagnosis, and even if it were, it's not, but even if it were, we do not have to see challenging behavior with autism. And the truth of the matter is that we can target it and we can change it. Stick with us because we'll be bring bring people in and talk about it all the time. It does not have to be, so know that there's hope. But we got this really lengthy question, and I really want to start to address it and to talk about it. So it's two-parter here, and I'm showing it to you now on the screen. It says, here is a difficult situation and difficult question, but I know that you said to send you in the hard questions, and I absolutely do. So I'm thrilled that you sent this because it's something we should talk about. I took my child to occupational therapy last Friday, and while in the waiting room, we began speaking with other parents that had children with ASD, some very severe, some moderate. The conversation shifted to talking about our experiences advocating with the schools for our children. I discovered something that shocked me. Would you believe that every parent in the waiting room that day had Child Protective Services, CPS, called on them by the school system? This goes on more than people want to admit. It's not easy to talk about. If you go to Google, you will see that this happens to a lot of parents that have special needs children with autism. Google, why should schools retaliate parenting children with special needs? I'm going to bring up the second part of the question. I'm going to mark that complete and bring up the second and show it to you. Can you imagine if the school did this to you and how you would feel? The CPS social worker came to our house to investigate. When she saw how frivolous the allegation was and that our child was fine and in a very loving home, she said that people sometimes use CPS to retaliate. She would not say who made the call, but we looked at her notes over her shoulder and saw that it was the school. I called an education attorney, and he said that it would take $10,000 to $15,000 to litigate, and in the end it would be our word against theirs. As you can imagine, this created a very hostile environment. Unfortunately, we do not have any money to fight the school in court. Have you heard about this happening to parents? What can parents do when this happens? Thank you for any help and or guidance that you can provide. We'll be watching for your response. Thank you very much. Sincerely, parents of a child with autism in a very difficult situation. Again, thank you so much for writing this question. We have some phone calls out at the moment to some of our legal counsel that we consult with from time to time, because I'd really like for them to weigh in on this. But I want to start to talk about it because, yes, this happens. It's appalling. It is absolutely appalling. And the first part of what I hear here is that here you are, a group of parents sitting around talking during OT, which, boy, haven't we all been there, right? And to hear that everybody in the room had CPS called tells me, because you're probably in the same area with the same school district, that somebody needs to blow a whistle on them. Somebody needs to call them out. Because we'll hear of schools doing this from time to time and having a pattern of doing this to try to scare parents. It's appalling. And I would love to tell you that it's just not the case and that people don't do that, but we know that they do. But if you see a pattern of somebody doing this, you have a wonderful opportunity. You know, it's that thing that we talk about on the show from time to time about what are the things, the serenity prayer, right? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So as much as I would love to tell you to go and litigate, the truth of the matter is, in terms of what I have seen, is that will take up so much of your time and so much of your energy and so much of your resources that will not actually in the end help your child. It's disappointing because, you know, you'd like to see this stop, right? And you would hope that it's not going to happen to you again, and how appalling that it happened to you once. The good news from what I'm seeing is that you passed with flying colors. They came to see something, saw that there was nothing, so it's unlikely that they're ever going to call CPS on you ever again. And if they did, I would think that CPS would, having already seen once, and know that you're having a battle with the school, is going to take that into consideration. Of course, there are no guarantees there, right? But having passed once, and usually when you're doing your job at home, you know, it's a gross misuse of everybody's time that it happened, and very emotionally upsetting. Very emotional. It's just, there's nothing okay about it. But in all likelihood, it's probably not going to happen to you again. However, you'd love to have it stop happening to other families. But since you have so many different people, I have to say as a parent, because I like to be a very loud mouth, I would ask you, who's the local newspaper, who's the local news team? And is there somebody that you have there that you could say, this is a story that you need to cover? Are you all part of the same school district? To say that this is, what a wonderful thing to bring to light, that this school district likes to call CPS in order to stop. You'd have to see if the other parents are willing to come forward and say, this happened to us, because, there's a thing that you feel like, oh, I've done something wrong. You haven't. You haven't done anything wrong, nor have they. They may not want to talk. But even if you could get 5 families to come forward and, be interviewed for the local news or the local newspaper to call somebody out, I have a feeling that it would happen less often, and it wouldn't cost you $10,000 to $15,000 and a whole lot of your time. And it's going to take parents who can call a school out and say, and if you can't get the newspaper to come and interview all of you, to write an editorial for the newspaper to say, why is the school, gather a couple of facts, don't waste all of your time on it. But if you're sitting there together with this group of parents and everybody saying, taking some numbers and saying, who else do you know, so that you can say, we're aware of 35 families that have asked for services from the school, and in all cases, or in 85% of the cases, or whatever it ends up being, these parents had protective services called on them, because shame on them, and somebody should be saying shame on them. It's unkind, like we don't have enough to deal with, that then they make us go through something as emotionally traumatic as that. Absolutely inexcusable. I don't think that we've heard back from any of our legal counsel, but I can promise you that the calls are in there, and we'll try to have somebody on the show next week to address this in terms of what your legal rights are. But what I love is that you guys are talking to each other, and this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important for us to have both a local support group and a more global support group, because we move through this experience and think it's only happening to us. And there's, all the guilt and the shame and, and feeling like, what have I done? And then you sit and talk to all these other parents and the picture gets clearer. You haven't done a thing. You've been doing your job, doing the best job that there is to do. And these people are taking advantage of people who are in a really difficult situation. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. But how lovely that you got that support in that group. And I'm wondering if you also are online with the local support group, if you could put it out to them and say, who else is this happening to? You can write a letter of complaint to whoever the school superintendent is, and say, we as a group of parents are aware. I have to say, I've just come back from this conference, and so much of the things that when I mentioned that when I was talking to experts, and they were so happy to see a parent and so thrilled to see a parent there, and they were all saying, the truth of the matter is that we can stand up and say this and this and this as experts, but it's when the parents organize that, we see it state by state, a group of parents get together and say, we're not tolerating this, we're not putting up with this, and that's when change happens. Really put, a zing in my step about how important we are as a group of people, that we can get together and say, I just don't think so. So I am so sorry that happened to you, and I'm so sorry that it's happening in your community. But I am thrilled that you're asking questions about it, and we're going to get a more expert answer, a legal answer. But boy, I have seen in my life that you call in reporters, and people don't like that. School districts don't like that, and personnel changes tend to happen if a whole lot of attention is called to the fact that people are doing things that are not reputable, and this is not reputable. Okay. Why I'm seeing there's the new question here. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to take a little bit of break, because I want to go through this and talk about and figure out, because I need to read all of it. Let's take a break. We'll come back, and we're also going to be we're going to be joined by Ashley, and she's going to come in and talk about babysitting and and respite and those kinds of things. So stick with us. I want to read through this and we'll get to the next part of the question. But thanks for writing in. Loving having this conversation.
Hi, Monique Erickson. I'm a senior supervisor here at CARD in the training department.
What kinds of things are fun for family fun when one of the members of the family is on the spectrum?
Well, there's lots of things to think about. Definitely we want you getting out there and enjoying life and getting outside the house with your child. So the only way to do that is to start getting out there and finding things to do. And there's lots of things when you look at the community. It depends on if you're just looking at a small day trip kind of outing or maybe bigger scale like going on the vacation type of outing. So I have found that there are a lot of local things. I know near me I have had lots of advertisements for the movie theaters have had children-friendly, what they call matinee kind of settings where they dim the lights, they're not completely off, the volume isn't too loud, so that you could possibly bring your child with autism there. That would be a good thing. There's lots of things like that when you're considering what are some local resources. I think having activities that have a definite goal in mind are helpful for our kids. So something like maybe bowling, where there's an activity where they know what they're doing and there's a purpose to what we're doing. We're not just walking around looking at stuff. I think it's important when you're trying to discern, where do we go? Just remember that what's reinforcing to all of our other kids may not be necessarily be so fun for our child. So maybe looking at fish in an aquarium in itself isn't so great for our kids, but maybe you can add something to that so that maybe if they really like matching, you can have a little something with them that they can go through the aquarium and match the fish as they see them or something to make it interactive. So just try to think about those places where what interests does my child have? Is there anything like that available that we can all kind of do together?
And do you have any suggestions on how to prepare for family fun?
Well, I think first of all you want to ask yourself, well, how long do I think we're going to go for? Am I trying to plan a whole day, which would be a bigger feat than we're just going for a couple hours. This is a small outing. So how long do you think you're going for? Another question might be, is there going to be a lot of downtime in this? Is there going to be some waiting, or is there going to be where they have to wait their turn or something? Is there going to be some downtime, and am I going to need anything during that time to help keep them engaged and happy while someone else is taking their turn, or so forth? So those are some questions. Do I need to bring special snacks? Do I need to bring food where we're going? Probably so. And what is that going to look like? What are you allowed to bring? Do you need to contact someone at that place and let them know, hey, we're coming and this is what we've got. This is our situation, this is what my child's needs are, I'd like to bring this, or do you have? A lot of places now have lots of resources for our families, which is really nice. I think times have really changed and people are getting more educated on that there are a lot of kids with special needs out there. And so if you contact the place you're going, they may very well have some special programs or resources that are available that you're not going to know about unless you ask.
What kinds of expectations should somebody have about, I'm calling it family fun, but what kinds of expectations should they have?
Well, when you're planning family fun outings, you want your expectations to be realistic. You don't want to set the bar so high that you are disappointed in how it went. So you want to be realistic. Keep in mind all families have difficulties with family fun outings. You've got a lot of personalities you're planning for. You're trying to keep everyone engaged, everyone happy. You're trying to keep yourself happy so you enjoy the outing as well. So there's a lot going into it, and so just keep your expectations realistic. Some things to think about when you're doing that is you can't go from 0 to 60. You can't expect your child who hasn't gone out into the community to all of a sudden do 8 hours of a community outing. So when you're planning that kind of fun of an event, so you got to kind of have to play it. What are his interests? What are some things he might have some experience with? What are some things you think that child might like, that the whole family would like? Or is there anything you can bring to the table for that outing that will help it go easier so that you're not feeling overwhelmed and swamped when you're out there doing it?
And how can you deal with meltdowns during an outing?
Just remember, meltdowns are going to happen. What you do and what I do and the individuals train, we're just doing the best we can to stack the deck, so hopefully it doesn't happen. But that doesn't guarantee anything. You could do everything right. You could pack, plan, do everything perfectly, and that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to go perfectly. And that's not just you because you're a parent. That happens to me. It happens to everybody. Working with these kids, working with kids in general. What kid is always exactly what you expected? So you just plan the best you can, and sometimes you're going to have a meltdown. It's just inevitable. When it starts to happen, you're going to try to hopefully see those signs because you know your child, and see if you can de-escalate it. Can you bring it down to something manageable? Be low key so you're not bringing too much attention, to the situation or to the child. And honestly, if it's just not going to be repairable at that point, you might need to take a little break, maybe return to the car, regroup, calm down, and see if you can pull everybody back together, pull that child back together so you can go back in and continue to have fun. And just try not to let it ruin your day, because it is going to happen. Even if you've planned everything perfectly, it doesn't mean that you missed something. It doesn't mean that you did anything wrong, or someone else would have done a better job. You could have done it perfectly, and sometimes it's just going to happen.
And for the neurotypical children in the family, what should you be doing for them while the other child's having a meltdown?
There's not a good, easy answer for that. There's not a completely fair answer for that for the other kiddos, and sometimes that's the unfortunate reality of these situations. But I think what's best, or what you can do, is prepare them ahead of time so that everybody knows going in, okay, this is what we're doing. This might happen. If this happens, this is what we're going to do. Hopefully you have another adult there with you. Hopefully you're not by yourself if you've got your child and some siblings. And if that's the case, and you have a plan, okay, if something happens, I'm going to address this, and you take care of these guys and make sure that they're safe and happy. If you do happen to be by yourself, then I think you want to think about that ahead of time. Okay, that trouble behavior might be likely in this outing, so you want to think about that ahead of time. You don't want to be caught off guard. Okay, if this happens, you've talked to the siblings. Okay, if so-and-so has a hard time, we might need to take a minute to make him feel better. There are some books in your bags that I have for you there. I want you to sit close to mommy, stay there, look at your books until we can get him feeling better and we can move on. So you want to have a plan so that the kids aren't caught off guard, or the siblings. They know what to expect. They know that there is a plan. They knew that this might happen, so it's not totally surprising them. And then maybe have some responses for them, whatever seems reasonable for your family. Like, okay, if this happens and we do have to cut this short, we will do this later, or we will do something fun, so they know that it's not the total end of their family fun outing. And it's hard. It's not a perfect response. I think that's the reality of family dynamics.
And why is it important for us to take our children on these outings if it's so difficult?
Well, something to remember is just, even if you've planned everything, sometimes these things might, not go as planned, and that's okay, and just take it as a learning opportunity. It's great that you're going out there and doing these outings. You need to go out there. Your child needs you to go out there and do these outings. It's part of their intervention, and being able to take those skills that we've been practicing and learning and bring them into the real world. That's your family needs to be able to go out and do these. If you stop doing these outings, then these aren't going to get better, and it may seem a little bit difficult at first, like, oh, it's so hard, but just think it will get better as you go. The more opportunity, like everything you learn, the more opportunity you have to practice it, the better it will get. If you only get one shot every couple of years to go out into the community, how good can you expect them to be at it? They have to have these opportunities. So it goes back to having realistic expectations. You're not going to plan an 8-hour outing for the very first one. Plan it more realistically, and just know that, it may not go perfect, but that's okay, and we're going to practice this again, because everybody needs to get out. Everyone needs to learn how to function as a family. Your child needs to learn how to be part of the community, and you'll just grow from there.
Good. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and our special guest right now is Ashley Colis. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
I wondered afterwards. I thought I don't usually call you by your last name, but we're so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
I so
glad
appreciate
to be here.
that you took the time to come in, and we're going to talk about babysitting. We're going to talk about respite, but we have something else to finish up talking about. So I'm going to beg your forgiveness, because we were able to get a hold of some of our legal counsel that we use to refer to when we have questions come up. And there was an additional part of this question that I'm going to read in a second, but I have some information for you, because one of the things that you wrote in was that this is happening in Tennessee. And our legal counsel said that yes, and they deal with this frequently, that this is something that happens, and that the first thing to do is to stay calm if this is happening to you, and to remember that unfortunately, the schools, because they are mandatory reporters, which you mentioned in your next part of your statement, they frequently have immunity. And this is one of the reasons why they do this, because it's something that they can do and something that they can get away with because they have immunity, because they're erring in the best interest of the child. And you mentioned that it can often be twisted if you do go to court. So I want to talk about a couple of different things. If you're in a battle and it is due process, and you wrote in here, all is fair in love and due process. Once the battle lines have been drawn in the sand, if you've hired an attorney, some schools will label you as public enemy number one. And that is the case in a lot of different schools, and that doesn't mean that we don't continue on and press on, right? Some do that before if they sense that you're the kind of tenacious parent who might fight the system. And remember, the schools, this is what you wrote, remember the schools hold some powerful cards. One of them is their mandatory reporting status to CPS, which can and frequently is twisted into a battle tactic. You also shared that the retaliatory moves might cause you to back off, and I'm afraid that it does in some parents. This may be what the school personnel are hoping, that they can intimidate you into dropping the issue. Having CPS investigate is a pretty scary thing, especially for those who know that having their children removed from your home or even a short time can cause further trauma or to a traumatized child. Disrespecting the parents helps discrediting the parents helps the court case, and if you're headed to court, the move may be one simply to help their case. You look more suspect to a judge if CPS has been involved, and you also wrote back that it's happening in Tennessee. So I don't know if this is two different people writing back, but our legal help has said that they've given us some phone numbers to call in the state of Tennessee, which is a very exciting thing. There is a Disability Law and Advocacy Center of Tennessee, and their phone number is 800-342-1660. Again, that's the Disability Law and Advocacy Center of Tennessee. It's 800-342-1660. You can call them and talk to them, let them know what's happening, and that there's not just one parent this is happening to. They also have 3 separate offices, one for Middle Tennessee, and I'm going to give you the numbers for each one of these, so get your pens ready. There's one for Middle Tennessee, one for East Tennessee, and one for West Tennessee. Our legal counsel suggested, though, that you call that 800 number first that's on your screen and ask them for help. But I'm also going to give you these other 3 numbers, which we won't put up on the screen. So you ready? Middle Tennessee, the number is 615-298-1080. Again, that's 615-298-1080. If you're in East Tennessee, it's 865-670-2944. That's East. It's 865-670-2944. If you're in West Tennessee, the number you want to call is 901-458-6013. Again, that's West Tennessee, 901-458-6013. They also mentioned, our legal counsel mentioned, that the University of Tennessee in Knoxville has a special education clinic, and that you can give them a call, ask for clinical. When you do that, you'll have to look them up online, and ask for the clinical department, share with them what is happening. That when one of the other things that our legal counsel mentioned is that if CPS arrives at your door and you're in a battle with your school district, be very welcoming, stay calm, allow them to come in and explain to them, and I'm sure that you did in your case, the full extent of why you think you've been called. You can say to them right out the bat, oh, that's interesting that you've been called. We're in a dispute with our school district. We're aware that a lot of the families that are in the dispute have CPS called. Be very calm and tell them, we think this is part of this ongoing legal battle. But they also recommended that I mentioned that, I think you should go to a journalist and have them cover it, but they mentioned that you can go to the Board of Education and ask them how the school district, call it to their attention and ask them how is their school district spending their time, resources, and funds and make them aware of the fact that they have a history of calling the CPS when a parent is in dispute. I think it's really important for parents to pick and choose where you want to put your time and your energy. Band together, even if it's two of you, your story is that much stronger, and letting them know that they're not going to get away with it. And I want to let you know that I was one of those parents that was labeled by the school district as somebody who was going to be difficult. I've shared before on the show that we were taken to due process twice. I'm a very happy parent, and my child ended up getting everything that he needed, and that sometimes, but those were battles that I felt in my gut I needed to fight, and that I had the time and the energy to fight them, and I fought them without legal help because I couldn't afford legal help at the time. I don't know anybody who really can, but I didn't have a way of working it out either. But I encourage you to follow your instincts of what you can handle, because priority number one is helping our kids, right? The one thing that I did say, if you are in a situation where your child is removed from the home, and I know that's the thing that everybody fears the most, is that through some misunderstanding, your child could be removed from the home. And the thing that of course our legal counsel said was that is the moment when you need to get legal help immediately, but that you can ask that Disability Law and Advocacy Center for help in terms of that, that there are public interest agencies that can help you, but you need to get a juvenile lawyer as soon as possible if your child has been removed or you're afraid your child is going to be removed. So I hope those numbers help you, and let us know what happens, what path you choose, because you got to follow your gut. But I hope that some of that information is useful to you, and shame on them. Just shame on them for putting you guys through this. It's absolutely horrible. It's certainly not unheard of, but it's inexcusable. And thank you so much for writing in. But now you've been waiting patiently. I'm so thrilled that you're here, because this is such an issue for all of us, I think. I thought it was just me. This is another one of these cases where I put out the question, because I like to learn here too, and I put out the question a couple months ago and said to families, what do you do about babysitting? And really my secret thing was that I thought, this is going to help me, and I'm going to know what I should be doing about babysitting, because it's a never-ending problem for my husband and I. We never ever go anywhere, do anything ever. And haven't for years. There's been like one huge exception, and it literally was that we had Ashley come to our house and babysit. We went to karaoke night. Right. That's what we did. I was trying to think what we did. How could I forget? Because I've been out exactly once in 3 years. It's really difficult, really difficult. And so you agreed to come in and talk about, because you have a wealth of knowledge. So let's start with who you are and how long you've been working with children.
Well, I'm Ashley, and I've been working with kids on the spectrum for almost 5 years now, since I was in my undergraduate. Mm-hmm. My professor told me, I think you'd be really good at ABA, and she referred me here to CARD. Mm-hmm. And that's how it all began, and I'm still around. But you have a wealth of knowledge with babysitting as well as ABA too, and you continue. That's something that you, do we call it nanny anymore? Do we? I do. Some of the kids call me their nanny. Okay. I still do it regularly. I'm still putting myself through school, so it's a great way for me to add some extra income. And I realize how important it is for families, whether you have a child on the spectrum or a child with special needs, or just a lot of children. Yeah, you need help. Yeah, and everybody needs a break. Definitely. And I think, one of the things that happens in families with typically developing children is that, there might be a period of time when they don't get babysitters because the kids are little, but there usually is the shift to, okay, we have babysitters that we get on a regular basis, and they do that, but for whatever reason, and I think there are a lot of them, families, like us that have kids on the spectrum, we have a harder time making that shift into leaving our children with other people. I think part of it is that sometimes our children aren't vocal enough about
about telling us if something goes wrong, so we're fearful. But there's also the big thing about we're afraid that somebody's going to mess it up, that we've worked 40 hours to, you know, target a behavior, and we're, you know, if it's that we're putting it on extinction and we're not feeding it attention, and then my fear always is somebody's going to come in and pay attention to something, and I'm going to have a new mess.
Oh, and I know that from my years in the field. I don't want that to happen either.
Right.
And neither does the clinical team or the teacher or anyone like that.
Yeah.
But I think importantly, with all parents, but especially parents of a child with special needs, is the idea of caring for the caregiver, taking care of yourself, and sometimes that means extra help.
Yes.
And we see some research that suggests that parents who actually bring in respite or babysitters, they have reduced stress in their house, and how much better environment for love and nurturing if there is less stress, and relating to each other intentionally and being able to enjoy time together. And so a lot of families do get funding for respite. You have to check it out with your regional center. Also looking into insurance companies. I was talking to our accounts manager about it, and I was like, do our families have this? Do we know? Because, you know, we definitely want to encourage them to use it. But the respite agencies out there are really helpful, and a lot of them are run by parents or people in the community who really want to help. It's not a multi-million-dollar business that they're running. And you get younger people who are fun, and sometimes you get older people who are more experienced, but there is definitely, you want to find the right person for your family, and not be afraid to say no to someone who comes in. And when you, in the first part of the process, when you're maybe looking for a babysitter, you have a lot more leeway in having interviews, and you can ask questions about how do you feel about a child with special needs, and what would you do in this situation? And you can offer tools like e-learning, which have a behavior management module in it, to help support them.
Yeah.
And you can offer many more things. With respite, you don't have as many options for how you can train the person and interviewing and stuff, but you can work with the agency and kind of ask yourself some questions. What do I need? When do I need this person? Do I need help at the grocery store? Is my kid gonna knock down every single cereal box on the aisle?
Because, you know, I think, and that's a really good point, Ashley, because I think that some people think that respite and babysitting is only for when you are out of the house.
No, and there
isn't.
Right, there are different needs. Some agencies won't leave the respite caregiver at your house alone. So in that situation, you might need to budget for a babysitter for some kind of date nights or those kinds of things where you're going to be out of the house. But like I said, working with agencies and asking yourself questions about what your needs are and what your child's needs are before you get to that level where you're working with an agency is important, because if you know what you want, you're much more likely to get it.
Let's go back just a little bit and talk about respite in terms of, because here in California we have regional centers. And if you are a client to the regional center, you have the ability to request respite. It's a really interesting thing, because, and especially in my local support group, everybody talks about it's so different who gets what respite, and I don't know how they determine it, but it's a very different thing for a lot of people. But you should ask for it, and a lot of people aren't told that they're eligible for it, so you really got to ask for it. And they'll a lot of times we hear that they'll say, well, how much did you want? And it's this very cagey thing. And I certainly, when it came time for us, I didn't know about it, and I was told ask for it, and they said, well, how much do you want? And I said, I don't, how much can I have?
Right.
Right? And I didn't know what was the appropriate amount, so I went to my local support group, said, what does everybody else have? Then you got to be really careful, though. In my opinion, don't shoot for the moon and ask for too much. Ask for what you're really going to use, because if you don't use it, they'll take it away.
Right. And so that plays into the planning aspect. So once you do go through this whole process and you've found someone, because you're so excited about date night with your husband, you know, it is a transition. So you have to invest some time in this person, because you're bringing them into your home, and you're probably well versed in that, having therapists and that kind of stuff.
But it's different
it is
when you're
always a
leaving.
transition, right?
Yeah.
And spending some time to kind of like overlap with that person, let them get to know this kind of routine, and let them first observe you with the child and see what your expectations are of their language, of their behavior, and then giving them the opportunity to work with you side by side with the child. And then from there, you can kind of see warning signs. You know, if the person lacks interest, if they seem more interested in their paycheck than the child, if they're constantly late. Those types of things are things that you want to look at too. And so if you do invest the time to kind of transition the person in, you'll also be able to weed out someone who might not be right for your family.
Yeah.
And if your child maybe has a adverse reaction to the person, then you know, I think I would give it some time. But our kids are pretty intuitive about different people, and they're able to read people well. So I think, like with your son, we get along really well, and I think you know I might be able to pull one over on Ashley, or you know, but we enjoy our time together, and I think that makes you feel comfortable about going out.
Yeah, well, he asks for you. He's like, why don't you and Dad go out and have Ashley come? Like, he would rather be with you because you're really, really fun. And I know that you don't just let him do whatever he wants to, that it's a very structured time, but it's still really fun for him. So, and they probably, and I'm going to admit my bad parenting, that not probably, in all likelihood, really realistically, you spend more time interacting with him one-on-one than I do, because I'm folding laundry and putting dishes in the dishwasher and those kinds of things.
And that's your job, my job when I'm there, or another babysitter or respite worker, that's their job. And I think that's another balancing point for parents. I think, especially if you have more than one child, your tendency might be like, oh, okay, they can watch both. But that's another thing, is if you really need someone to help with your other kids, or you need help around the house, then to not be afraid of trying to seek help for that. And that takes budgeting and other types of planning, but it is important, and we see that it reduces stress, and it gives you time to relate to your partner. And those are all important things, because we can get lost in the day-to-day when it's homework and field trips, and on the weekend, you know, Costco and all those things. So we want to have a good balance, and I think that's definitely important.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back and go back to talking about expectations, because I think that's a really important. And everybody's going to have individual expectations, but making them abundantly clear to whoever it is that you're working on, because we're more likely to be successful if we say what our expectations are, right?
Right.
Okay, so we're going to take a break, and we're going to be back more with Ashley Colis talking about babysitting and respite. Is this not a good topic? Stick with us. We're here today with Sarah Cho, who is the managing supervisor of the CARD Fresno office, and it's a special treat for us to have her with us today. And we're going to be asking her to talk to us about working with children who are nonverbal. So when a child is not speaking, are we saying that they're non-vocal or non-verbal?
The correct terminology is non-vocal.
Okay.
Because when we're saying vocal, vocal means sound. So sound is being emitted.
Okay.
So verbal means that the child is able to communicate to another person that they need something, they have desires, they have wants, and a verbal response might be handing a picture.
Okay.
Might also be a sign. Might also be pressing a button to ask for something.
Okay.
Those would all be considered verbal behavior. But if they don't have speech, we might say that they're non-vocal. So imagine then if you have a child who's not developing speech typically, they have no way to tell their parent what they need, you're going to see frustration levels increase. And if I don't have a way to appropriately get my point across, I'm going to start developing some really bad excessive behaviors to communicate. So that's when we start to see the noncompliance, the tantrums, the aggression, even self-injurious behaviors emerge. We're going to use really short and concise and clear speech. Pair it with a gesture. And then when the child starts responding, immediately praise. immediately give a reward. So then that way the child is starting to understand, I got it. I'm understanding what she's wanting me to do. At the same time as working on receptive instructions, we do need to teach the child also a way for them to communicate too.
Right.
So we're going to start working on very basic requesting behavior. So they're able to request for things. And so the two kind of go hand in hand.
If there are no sounds, then maybe we start with signs.
You could start with signs, or you could start with an icon. As a parent, you're going to know your kid best in the sense that you're going to know kind of what they like. If you have a kiddo who likes to look at pictures, who likes to look at books, maybe an icon is going to be something that would be preferred, and they would get really good at giving it. If you have a child who is, you're like, wow, they have really great fine motor. Maybe they can already string beads. Mm-hmm. Maybe they can do a shape sorter. Mm-hmm. The ability to manipulate their hands and their fingers is pretty solid. Maybe you might want to work on some very basic signs.
Okay, so taking whatever the strength is and running with that.
Absolutely. So let's say that you do an icon or you do a sign. Both of those forms of communication have been linked to development of expressive speech. So, if that's something that we're starting with today, because we need to get through today, right, that doesn't mean that that's what we're going to end up doing tomorrow.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders talking to Ashley Colis, who's talking with us about babysitting and respite care and how we arrange these things in a positive way, because I just can't seem to make it work except with you. And I have to say this too, that, how wonderful. It had not occurred to me that I could, and you have to make sure if you have an ABA provider that it's okay with them, right? But that sometimes some of the ABA providers, some of the therapists are willing to babysit on the side and be paid individually for that, because they're putting themselves through school and doing those kinds of things. So that hadn't, frankly, occurred to me before, because I think I was underslept and overwhelmed. So how wonderful to do that. But I want to go back to, you brought up expectations, and how it's so important for the parent to know what their expectations are, but also there are some expectations that the caregiver is going to have as well, and that would be a good question to ask them about, what are your expectations, right? Some parents, I see this with typically developing, kids with typically developing, you know what I'm trying to say. It's that time of the day. Parents of typically developing children who have this expectation that their babysitters are not only going to watch all 12 of their children, but they're also going to do the ironing, make the beds, clean the kitchen, vacuum, which I just look and go, are you kidding me? That seems so shocking to me, and they pay less than we pay, and I just go, what are you doing?
Yeah, I've met some of those parents.
I'm sure. And I think that I know people have come and babysat for us in the past, because we had a couple of college students that babysat for us the first couple of years, then they graduated, and then, I was completely alone in the dark. But they had come from other people and said, so where do I put away the dishes and this? And I said, no. If you touch my dishwasher, I will be upset, because it means you won't be working with my child and playing with my child. You're here to be with my child. I expect until he is asleep and unconscious that you are with him. And that please do not do any housework. When he is asleep, if there is a mess from the stuff that you guys have taken out, I would love it if you picked up things then, and I especially love it when people pick things up as they're, because my child gets overwhelmed if you pull out 5 things, but do not do housework while my child is awake.
And that's an expectation that you have, and it's really great that you are able to communicate that with them before, and they know, okay, with this child I need to do this. It's just like with therapy, or just like with a school teacher. It's different every year. It's different with every teacher and every therapist. So for me, one family that I babysit for their children regularly every week, and I put away their dishes after they eat dinner, because I usually feed them dinner, and then I might put away their toys after they go to sleep. But other than that, I really don't do anything else around the house, because I am with them, and they have a small child who needs to be either held or be holding my hand at all times. So that is something that the parents have communicated with me like, oh, when they're done, you can put their dishes away. But that's a really great point, is prioritizing for the sitter or for the respite worker what they should be doing. Should they be playing outside? And then using that time that we talked about, maybe like overlapping or sharing time with the child and the caregiver that you're bringing in, and interacting with the child and kind of modeling the behavior. That's how we learn, is by observing our environment. So,
and for those of you who don't know, in terms of overlapping, because that's kind of a you know, a therapy term, that you're there while they're there, that you're the same time, so they see how, as you said, how you're interacting with them, you see how they're interacting with them. A really important thing to do. We never want to do that because it's expensive. And if you're looking for the date night, the date night is expensive. By the time you pay and you go out and you pay for the gas and whatever the entertainment is that you're doing and the dinner and everything, and then you pay the babysitter, and it's like, holy moly, this is why we don't go out. And then on top of that, you want to have them come for 3 or 4 hours beforehand on a different day. It gets expensive. But you know what? That 3 or 4 hours ends up saving you a whole lot, right?
Right, and I think that it's budgeting, and we're all in a position where we really need to watch our finances.
Yeah.
And so it does take a good amount of planning. But I think that those 3 or 4 hours that you might be out with your husband or out with your friends or doing something are much more enjoyable when you feel like you can really trust someone. The person there loves your child and is going to be there for them. You're going to be able to be much more present where you are. So I really firmly suggest that for my friends who have young children. I have a friend who's pregnant and she definitely needs help. And so she said, what do I do? Help me. So I went through all, what do you ask the person? And I wrote down all the interview questions for her, and I talked to her about overlapping. And she's like, I never thought about that. But it's true, because her daughter does have a little issue with her speech, so sometimes you have to kind of decipher what she's saying.
Right.
And she's
That's
very
most kids.
quiet, and she's so sweet, but she's very quiet. So just spending time, like having someone decode for you what she's saying is important.
It is.
And then once you get used to her, you know what she's saying most of the time. But that's another thing with our kids too, is that sometimes their speech might be an issue, and so you want to make sure that the person is able to understand them, and this means this, or that's along the lines of the expectations, and then understanding behavior management too. I think that's important. And so you got to find someone who's comfortable with your child's level of needs as far as behavior management, and then giving them the tools for that. So, like I mentioned, e-learning has a great module.
Yes, a wonderful, wonderful module. They wouldn't even necessarily need to do the whole thing, but do the behavior module. I think that's really important. So many things in there that I wanted to talk about, Ashley, that you brought up, but having the expectation that you're going to have to train them to deal with behavior and the proper response. And I think that's one of those things, like I said before, we're so afraid somebody's going to come in and mess up. But if, the thing that you've been working on forever, and now you got to go back and work on it. But if you took those 3 hours and did an overlap and taught them and said, so if he does this, then I'm going to do this, and you brought up you're going to be so much more comfortable on your date night with your spouse, but you're also going to, I think that person is going to be more likely to stick around too. Because if they know how to deal with the challenging behavior, they're not going to be as overwhelmed by it.
And I think as myself and other people that I know that go into people's homes and they provide babysitting, or other people I know that provide respite services, they want to work with the parents as a team. They don't want to be the parent. So having kind of a collaborative effort, which we want with schools as well, it's the same as having someone come into your home, is really important, because we feel supported, and then we know that we can support the family. And so that whole process is really important for everyone to be happy and to continue with working with each other. And then another point that I wanted to bring up when you were talking was that I know a lot of the supervisors at CARD and a lot of the people that I know that work in the field are really excited about babysitter and nanny training, because we want that consistency. And I remember reading an email and asking about that for a child, like, can we train this nanny? And the supervisor's like, I'm all for nanny training. So it is something that you can also ask your supervisor about. I'm bringing a babysitter in, would you mind overlapping, or could this person come to the clinic? And you can always ask. The worst thing you're going to hear is no.
I can't imagine why they would say no. So great point. Great point.
And they're going to support you in some way. It might not be the way that you ask for, but it might be the right way for the child. So I think that it's good to kind of ask for that help too on the clinical side if you have a team that you're working with.
Absolutely. If you've got a team that's coming in, that ask them, go to the clinic, or to have them overlap when the therapist is there. If you're doing the workshop, they could come when the workshop person is there. If you're doing CARD learning and skills at home, you could have them do the CARD learning and train them yourself. But what a wonderful, and I can completely see that because my son just spent the weekend with Grandma, and Grandma has seen a lot of the ABA over the year, but some sticks and some doesn't. And it's fascinating to see the kinds of things that my son is saying and doing today versus what he was saying and doing on Thursday before I left. And we're going to have to tighten some screws here and there to see. She said to me that there was at least one day when she asked him to do something and he said no, and I said, you did not let him get away with that. And she said, well, I didn't want to push it. And I was like, we don't ever do that. You ask them to do something, you have to follow through, and if that means that the TV stays off for the next year, whatever it takes, there has to be some follow through here. We don't give paychecks when the behavior that we want isn't there. And she was like, okay, all right.
And that's where the overlap comes in. Seeing that, I have a child who says no to me a lot or runs away, and his parents, we were talking about this a little bit on the break, his parents don't always want to hear what happens that is not great, because he's so smart and he's amazing and he's so little and he does so many amazing things for his age, but they're still happening. So we were talking about having that open communication and trust, so that you definitely want to know if new behaviors come up when you're not home, or if something's happening, when you're not in the house, or any of those little things. It's kind of like an extra set of eyes and ears.
And putting that in the expectations, right? Of saying, and when I come home, here are the kinds of things I want to hear about. And then being open-minded to maybe some of them are not things that you want to hear. You don't want to hear that your son is hitting his sister when you're not there, or that your son decided he was going to pee on the floor instead of in the toilet when you weren't home either. But those are things that happen, and you also want to support the caregiver in any kind of discipline that you choose, because you also don't want them to be like, okay, that just happened and we're not going to do anything about it, because it is important, to deal with those behaviors. So being open-minded and supportive, because I know I felt sometimes like, oh, I can't say anything, these parents are going to be upset if I say something. But I know that as a parent, I would want to know what's going on. Me too. I want to know everything. Which leads me to where are you on nanny cams? How do you feel being on the other side of it? How do you feel about nanny cams?
I think that for me, doing so many years of therapy, I'm used to doing therapy like someone's watching me. And I've worked in both center-based and home-based therapy environments, and I have worked in front of nanny cams and not in front of nanny cams, and I like them because I think that sometimes they keep you in check. So I always try to I do everything like I'm in front of a camera. Because I would want that to be how someone would conduct themselves with my child, like I'm always watching.
Isn't that a good answer? Isn't that that's the best answer, Ashley, because honestly, and I've shared this before on the show, that anytime somebody came in my home to do therapy, I said, and by the way, there are cameras. I'm going in the other room, but I'm going to see and hear everything that you do. So don't say or do anything that you don't want me to hear or see. And it was always interesting to me, people's reactions. Some people were like, oh, and then I made sure I watched really well every single twitch and moment, where other people were like, oh, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. And then I felt that much more comfortable, and I wasn't as glued to the monitor. I was always listening to learn, but wasn't as glued to the monitor. I just loved that response.
Right.
That go ahead, look, because everything I'm going to be doing is on the up and up, so I welcome. That is the right answer always, I think.
Some people wouldn't agree, but I think it's important. And I have a little niece, and she's like the apple of my eye, and my fiance and I adore her. But I'm like, oh, we need to get a nanny cam for her because I want to, I want to make sure that everyone's taking care of her the way that everyone else takes care of her. So it is important, and I think that we're kind of moving into an age where everything's on webcams and meetings and conferences, and it also gives us so many more tools to use to our advantage. It can go the other way as well.
Sure.
But to use that to be able to say, this is the new behavior that I was talking about that came up, And I think a lot of the parents don't spend time reviewing it, but it makes you feel better and you have the money to spend on it, I'm all for it.
Okay.
And I support it.
Okay. Well, I think it's a great thing, too. But in terms of going back to expectations again, when you're interviewing somebody, you said that you made a list of questions for your friend. Share with us. What are some of the questions that you suggest parents ask when interviewing a babysitter to come to their home?
I think the first important question is just to ask them what their background is with children. And then if you have a child with special needs, what is your background working with children with special needs? I think it would be important to ask them about a situation where they've felt like they needed to discipline a child or they have disciplined a child, because you kind of want to see their answer on that, whether it fits your style. And also asking them about their comfort level with challenging behaviors. Asking them if they're willing to have training, whether that's CPR, or e-learning, or some kind of safety training. Also asking them what their availability is, because there's no bigger waste of time to have someone come in that's only available mornings.
Or only going to be around for a month.
Right.
They're graduating in a month and leaving and going to Spain.
Right.
And you just spent a whole lot of time training them.
So knowing all those things up front, and then asking them if they'd be willing to kind of go through a training process with you. Some people might not feel like that's for them, or they might not feel like they need that support. So that might not be the right fit for your family.
But there are other people who are grateful and go, oh, I'd love to get, if you're paying for it, I'd love to get CPR trained.
Right, I would. I would love for someone to pay for it for me. So I think that those are important things to ask, and making sure that you pay attention to whether they're on time and their interest level during the interview. And then if you do have a chance to observe them with their kid, how do they interact with their child? Do they click? And trusting our intuitions and our child's, kind of how our child interacts with them is important as well.
I think, if your child, you might love the person, if your child doesn't, then I think that's a really good indicator not to. But on the other hand, your child might love somebody, but something in you says, and I think you should listen to that too.
Right, and I think as women, we do have those feelings about people and feelings about situations, and a lot of times we're right.
And sometimes, and I actually took a class in psychology in college and I always refer back to this, and I only took a couple of psychology classes. I'm not, that's not my area, but I remember taking a class in social psychology where they talked about how sometimes you get a feeling and you kind of fill in your brain, you say, well, it's probably this. It may not be that, but it's still something worth being concerned about.
Right.
You may not be able to label it, and it may not be the thing that you're worried about, because sometimes we make a leap to really horrible things. It may not be something horrible, but it might be something that's still important. That your brain has so much capability to notice so many things that it can't always language, but that you should always listen to your instincts.
And we tend to switch our answer, or we tend to talk ourselves out of things.
Yes.
But usually it is our first intuition that is correct.
Yeah.
And they say that about tests. You go with the first thing that you thought it was, because sometimes you second guess yourself and you get that test back and it was the first thing that you thought.
Yes.
So using that interview to judge some of those warning signs and look for them is important, because we talked about, if you're comfortable when you're away, you're going to want to be away more, and you're going to have less stress because you'll be able to be away more. And I think it's great for kids to have people to look up to, especially younger college students. For your son, he's younger. He wants to be around boys and guys, and that's cool. So the little girl that I babysit, she loves bows and brushing my hair and me brushing her hair. So it's fun. It's little, it's really good for her mom. She loves seeing us play dress up and do those things, and she doesn't always have time, but she knows that her daughter's enjoying herself when she's not around.
In some ways, it's sort of that big brother, big sister kind of feel to it, that, you know, you're giving them another role model, which means you want to make sure it's the role model that you want, but what a wonderful opportunity.
Right.
We have friends that they always say to everybody who's reluctant to get a babysitter, they're like, you know, you're cheating your child out of these people in their life, and you're cheating yourself. And of course, we know that the divorce rate is high in general. Add other things on top of that, and then, you know, our phrase for today, our jargon for today was EO. So, you know, make yourself underslept, overwhelmed, no time together. What kind of an EO for success for a happy marriage is that? Or a happy, any kind of family life, really.
And you also don't want to get to the point where you can't handle your child anymore, because we've been talking about kids who their behaviors might be more mild, they might have more language, but we do have kids who have needs, and I've worked with them also, that are challenging for us physically and emotionally. So having someone come in and help with respite is really important, because you don't want that child to be placed outside of the home. And there is other research that suggests that bringing in a respite person to help does reduce that happening in families. So it's one of the most underutilized resources, I think, at this time. And parents, as much as people are working and worried about finances, this is a really great resource. And if you don't have respite, look into a babysitter. There are wonderful people out there.
We mentioned respite in California through the regional center, and we know that the regional center funding has gone down substantially because they're funding issues. But, you know, you can apply for a grant for respite, and there are other states that have respite programs, and you want to ask your local support group, how do you get respite? How are you affording it? Do you have somebody that's paying for it? My understanding is that some insurance includes some money for respite. And if you think, oh, okay, it's not really worth it, but imagine if you're eligible for 2 hours of respite a week. And let's say, you know, in the worst case scenario of respite, that it's 2 hours of respite a week where you still are in the home when the child is there. That's 2 hours of sleep, 2 hours of laundry, 2 hours of getting the house cleaned up. I mean, stop and think about what you can do. What can't you do with 2 hours? Or even going to the grocery store and getting all the marketing done in that 2 hours while somebody is with you, with your child. I mean, really.
Or even if you have another child in your home and you feel like you're spending so much time. We have those, someone called them a sandwich kid, a child who doesn't have special needs, but they're kind of in the middle of everything. They need one-on-one time also.
So maybe that 2 hours is just with them, you're playing with them and knowing that the other child is taken care of. What a great point.
Yes, so I've worked with families who use their time that way to spend one-on-one time with either child, and then I will not work with, or go do something else with the other child. And so their kids get one-on-one time with either mom or dad, because otherwise it's not easy when it's a small child and an older child, because they're in opposite directions, or twins, or those kinds of things. You want to spend one-on-one time, and that's important.
A really great point. Okay. And so if people have more questions about babysitting or respite, they can write in and we'll refer the questions to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Because she's an awesome, awesome babysitter, and we have to have you come back. I gotta have a date with my husband sometime this lifetime.
For sure.
So we're going to take a short break and come back and close out the show. But Ashley, thank you so much for being here and sharing all this information. We really appreciate it.
And I hope to see you and your son and your husband soon. And I hope that parents will take advantage of this.
Yes,
really.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right, stick with us. Back in just a minute.
When Maddie was diagnosed, I'll be honest, I was very ignorant on what autism was. I knew that autism was basically something that hit boys at the age of 2 to 3. They shut down, and sometimes you think of the typical Rain Man movie. And with Maddie, she was doing all the same signs and symptoms of a typical child with autism spectrum disorder.
Stand up.
She didn't even acknowledge us coming into the room. She had barely any eye contact. She didn't interact with her sisters. She didn't really do anything. She just basically lined up her toys and that was about it. We have a team of 7 volunteers, or 8 now. We have 8 volunteers, including my husband and I. And I'm the team leader, and so I do all the curriculum and get everything ready each week.
Jana was downstairs until 11 o'clock at night working on curriculum, going through 2 different textbooks. And then we, as a group, meet on Monday nights, and we would go through what the curriculum was from Jana. And a lot of times we would go, well, how exactly do you do that? How do you sit her at the table and do this trial base? What Skills has done for us, it's taken that away from Jana trying to figure out the curriculum for one. She can go down, or even our laptop, and she can sit down and through all these questions, it comes up with the different programs.
At least for me, it was a relief off my shoulders. I was worried that I might be missing something, missing a curriculum that maybe she needs to know, where Skills, they have every possible thing your child needs to know from 0 to 7. They have a program for that.
What noise is this?
Good job! Every program that we did with her, I knew it was specific for what she needed to learn. Because before Skills, it was a lot of, okay, well, is that really age appropriate for a 2-year-old? You know, because it's not generalized. It's anywhere from 0 to 7. This is what your child needs to know. In most manuals, you'll find. But for this, okay, yep, she should be learning this. And no, she's not 4 yet. She doesn't need to know that yet.
We are so fortunate that Jana was able to attend a conference put on by CARD that opened the door for Skills, and that there's no looking back for us.
We started using the program in November, and it seemed like by January something just clicked, and she has completely kind of came out of her fog that she was in for quite a while.
I have never read a documented case on any child that has not benefited anything from applied behavior analysis, and now with this new Skills and being, you know, like the E version of ABA, I can't imagine it doing anything harmful to their child. It's nothing but exponential growth for us.
To see her now, it just blows us away. I mean, we call her our little miracle child because in 7 months' time, she has just blossomed into this normal, functioning child, and suddenly, we joke about it all the time, like suddenly we have twins.
If you're even thinking about doing it, do it. Because the absolute worst thing you can do is do nothing at all. And even if you use this program and it's just a single mom or a single dad working in the evenings with their child, this program is going to benefit them. It's going to show you where they are, it's going to show you where they need to go, and it's going to show you what skills and how to get there. It is an online book on how to help recover your child.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I was just making a note, and while I was talking to Ashley, our person who wrote in about the Tennessee issue expressed that they already had talked to that Disability Law and Advocacy Center of Tennessee, and that they were not helpful, which I'm very sorry to hear that. But I cling to that a reporter might be exactly what you need. And also the idea of going to the Board of Education, what our legal counsel had said was go to the Board of Education as a group or singly and say, I have concerns about how the school is spending their time, energy, and resources. Might be enough to call, you know, it's terrible. When we get into intimidation, right, it's absolutely terrible. But sometimes when people push, and you have to judge by your gut whether it's time to push back. My gut tends to say, you know, for me, push back, but that may not be what's right for you. But that's just not nice word that I want to say, that they're taking advantage of families in that way. And again, I'm sorry, but I hope, keep me posted. Let me know what you do decide to do and how it goes, because I'd like to know what happens next. Also, somebody else wrote in and said, I want to know if you've read Disconnected Kids by Robert Melillo, which I have not read. So I'm going to be excited to take a look at that. Love it when you guys recommend books to us. And it sounds like you have read it. And so if you want to Skype in at some point and talk to us about it, we'd certainly be interested to talk to you about that. And you also mentioned the Brain Balance Center, which I'll put out a thing to see if anybody is aware of that we could have talk about on the show. Love it when you guys make suggestions. I want to remind all of you on this day, what a great job you're doing. What a great job you're doing. You know, I don't know why we all got assigned this job of being parents and advocates for our particular kids. I don't know why. But I know I have yet to meet an autism parent that I don't really like. And that tells me a lot. You know, I've been a lot of autism parents and I go, man, I really like that person, or man, how exciting. And I did get to meet some amazing parents this last weekend. People, there were two women in particular that I can think of off the top of my head who both had sons who are in their 20s that just really were amazing to me, that talking to them just kind of lifted me up, and I thought, okay, we can do this. And I know it's hard some days, and especially when people, I said this to somebody the other day, you know, it's bad enough when somebody is being ineffectual, and we get treated to that, right? That we know what's possible for our kids and we're moving along and we fight for them to get the services, and then you run across somebody who's ineffectual. And that is so disappointing to me and so upsetting and disheartening. But it is not as bad as somebody who isn't ineffectual, who is deliberately trying to put more obstacles in front of your child's progress. And that, I'll tell you what, more than anything else, that sticks in my craw. Boy, that gets me angrier than anything else, because that's not just being ignorant, right? And ignorance is bad enough to combat, but somebody who tries to hurt us or our kids, well, you know, and I say shame on them, and I wonder how those people are ever going to be able to sleep. I happen to be a big believer in karma, so they need to look out, right? But that doesn't solve our issues. Let us know what you end up deciding to do, and if there's more that we can do to help you. If I need to find you a reporter in Tennessee, let me know. Okay. This show is going to end, but the conversation goes on. And so Emily's going to scroll through some of the different ways, not all of them, but some of the different ways that you can get a hold of us. I want to remind you that we're not here the rest of this week. My boy is turning 9, and so I need to take some time with him, and I was away for the weekend. So this is our little trade-off. We're going to be back next Monday, and we've got a lot of different stuff to start showing you. I hope that we're going to be able to show you some stuff on Monday, and lots more interesting topics to talk about, but there'll be replays during the rest of this time, and please feel free to stay in contact with us. I will still be in touch via Facebook and via email, so please use this time to look at some of our older episodes and to let us know things that we can be doing to prepare for you in the coming days over this long summer where we're all going to make progress, right? Because progress is available to our kids, to all of them, and we can do this. So please take the time to write in and tell us what's working for you here, what isn't working for you here, the topics that you're more interested in, and the questions you're more interested in. We love how much you guys interacted today. As much as I don't love the topic, hard to talk about, but I know that somebody's going to hear this and either have an answer or know that they're not the only one, and that's really important. Also want to remind you guys to celebrate. That's part of what I'm going to be doing this weekend, and that when you have the opportunity to celebrate, how important it is. So again, I thank you for letting us be with you for this time. Watch previous episodes. Find us on YouTube. Find us on Blip. And of course, you can continue to watch rebroadcasts here. I thank you for letting me be here with you, because it's really important to me. And until we're back next week, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.